Welcome to HP Fanfiction. Support me by subscribing the channel. Also, like and share the video to keep me motivated to make more videos like these. Harry and Hermione emerged from the beach chalet into the beautiful tropical sunshine, ready for their first morning run around the island. The couple weren't ready for the sight that greeted them. Neville and Padma were standing on the beach and clearly waiting on their friends. "Guys, could you help me get fit? I need to do this. I need to be able to protect my family, and getting fitter will help with that." Harry really couldn't refuse, and had no intention of doing so. "Sure, Neville, as long as you're certain you want to do this." That was greeted with a determined nod, though Hermione missed it. She was too busy staring at Padma. "Granger, not one bloody word." "Sorry, Padma, but I have to. You can't run like that." Padma was wearing a baggy t-shirt that she'd purloined from Neville over her bikini. "Why, what's wrong with this? You'll be jiggling all around the island." "But Hermione, Neville likes to watch me jiggle, and this is the first summer I've had anything worth jiggling. I thought it might provide him with a little bit of motivation when we start to get knackered." "Oh, you silly witch, you would be sore after a few miles. Come with me and I'll get you sorted." As she dragged Padma into their chalet, Hermione dropped her voice, though made sure both boys could still hear. "All we have to do is run in front of them." That certainly gets Harry's attention. As the two giggling girls left, Harry then asked Neville the question that was certainly on both his and Hermione's minds. "How did you get Padma up at this hour to exercise?" Neville was still trying to get his head around that after a few miles comment, so it took him a moment to answer. "She insisted. I am hers, and she's mine, so I wasn't getting to go running without her." You can't fault a Ravenclaw's logic. "We really are two incredibly lucky blokes, Neville." Neville couldn't fault that Ravenclaw logic either, especially when Padma re-emerged in a sports bra and a pair of tight shorts. Neither noticed Dan behind the girls. Both were too busy looking elsewhere. "Take care on your run, you four." Neville and Padma aren't used to it. "Don't worry, Dad. We'll look after them." Watching his daughter run along the beach with her friends was a dream come true for the father. In his dreams, though, Hermione wasn't running alongside her mate with a razor-sharp sword strapped on her back, since it was both girls giggling in Hermione's room that had woken him in the first place. Dan decided Hermione's laughter and obvious happiness was well worth these little eccentricities. He also decided to head back to their bedroom and rejoin his wife in bed. Jake left his daughter's bedroom with a wry smile on his face. Bea just loved listening to her namesake's stories about Peter Rabbit. She was only 6, but knew most of the stories off by heart now, Jake or Helen having read them to their little girl as bedtime stories since she was a toddler. Thoughts of Beatrix Potter were banished from his mind, instantly replaced by something that was far more akin to Stephen King's genre of writing. A strangely dressed woman was grinning like a maniac as she came up the stairs toward him. "What the hell are you doing in my—" This woman pointed a stick at him, and suddenly Jake couldn't move a muscle. He wasn't even able to speak as she casually strolled toward him. "Hush now. You wouldn't want to wake—" "Daddy, who's this?" Jake was helpless to intercede and left absolutely horrified at this creature's actions. His sleepy daughter had just opened her bedroom door to see what her daddy was shouting at when this crazy bitch struck as fast as any snake and was every bit as deadly as any member of that species. He would never again hear his darling Bea asking her incessant questions. His beautiful daughter would never speak again. This evil bitch had done something that just slashed open his baby's throat. It's strange how the mind works in times of great stress and horror. As his beloved Bea slumped to the floor dying, the only thought running through Jake's brain was that her favorite pajamas were totally ruined. Part of him knew his wife must have met a similar fate, otherwise Helen would have been storming up the stairs, clasping something in her hand and ready to have a go at this cold-blooded murderer. When the crazy bitch then dipped her fingers in his daughter's warm blood to write something on the wall, he would quite happily have strangled her with his bare hands before sticking that wooden stick through her heart, just to make sure she was really dead. Jake was a quiet man who'd never courted trouble in his life. He never thought it would be possible for him to want to maim and murder someone as much as he did this creature. She then had the audacity to chat to him as if they'd just bumped their shopping trolleys in Tesco. "You're actually quite lucky, you know. Normally we like to take our time, and I'm sure your daughter's screams would have been quite delicious. Of course we would have made you watch it all, what we would have done to both your daughter and your wife." A gruff male voice, Jake had never heard before, called up the stairs. "Bella, you finished yet?" "Just coming, lover. He so worries about me, it's actually quite cute to see." "Yes, you're really lucky that this will be quick." Jake actually thought she was right. He did feel lucky. Lucky to be joining Helen and Bea. He certainly didn't want to live in a world without them. A flick of her stick and Jake got his wish. As his arterial blood now mingled with that of his daughter, his last thought at seeing the red writing on the wall was that the stupid bastards must have gotten the wrong house. Dan had purchased a beach volleyball kit and Dobby had dropped it off for them in their beach chalet. The extended family all loved playing and watching, with the improvised court kept busy for most of the day. By rotating the team members so every tournament was different, it was also kept a lot of fun. Tonks was currently on court, teamed with Pansy against Neville and Parvati, when she spotted her boss approaching. The Aureur's senses were screaming something was badly wrong here. Amelia looked fierce enough to scare the shit out of a troll. "Guys, I think we're gonna have to leave this game for now." As more and more people noted Amelia's approach, they gathered around her as a group to hear what she had to say. The head of the DMLA couldn't think of a bigger contrast, this idyllic beach setting and the dark news she was going to have to give them. With the whole of Britain soon to be aware of the news, she really had no option. Amelia looked at all the faces gathered round in a semicircle and actually wanted to be anywhere but here at the moment. The escaped Death Eaters struck against a Muggle family. Mother, father and their 6-year-old daughter were all murdered. They changed their entire method of attack so very little magic was used, and none of it dark enough to set off our detectors. They killed quickly and must have been in and out of their victim's house in a matter of minutes, with no dark mark being cast either. Augusta was first with a question. "How do you know it was the escaped Death Eaters then?" "They left another calling card, the same bloody message written on the wall that they used in Azkaban. This was the only reason we picked up on it. The Muggle authorities thought it was some sort of drug fight between dealers and the attackers picked the wrong house. Cornelius is meeting with their Prime Minister at the moment to let them know exactly what's happening." Tonks then asked the question Amelia knew would cause all the trouble. Were this family picked at random or do they have a connection to the magical world? They had no connection to the magical world, but they weren't exactly chosen randomly. Jake, Helen and Little Bea all had the last name of Potter. An icy hand visited this tropical paradise and gripped all of them. Harry had been sitting on the sand beside Hermione when the hammer blow hit. He staggered to his feet and lurched in the direction of their little chalet, only to drop to his knees after about 10 yards and paint the beach with the contents of his stomach. Hermione had already been moving to accompany him and was at his side in seconds, with Padma and Lena right beside her. An elf appeared with some iced water for Harry, which he gratefully accepted. He still couldn't seem to get his legs working though. Lucas soon solved that problem by scooping Harry up as if he was a small child and carrying him toward his beach chalet. Hermione, Padma, Luna and Emma all followed in his wake. The beach chairs were soon all grouped together so they could effectively hold a family meeting. One of their own again needed help, and they intended to supply every bit they could. His father's voice had become almost a growl, displaying just how angry Barchoke was. This was what Harry feared most, that they would target people associated with him. That's why he had all the Marauders' pins changed to portkeys at the party. How can we possibly guard against this happening again? Dan, do you have any idea how many Muggle families in Britain have the last name Potter? It would be a wild guess, but I think it would certainly be in the thousands. The last census should have that exact information, including addresses. Amelia felt her gut tighten at that figure. That's far too many to effectively guard, and you can't ward their properties without a magical member of the family to tie the wards to. The family meeting was a new experience for Zeno, but he had watched as his daughter was accorded universal acceptance into this group. He certainly intended to help any way he could and offered his opinion. I assume the Muggle newspapers will be all over this should they strike again at another family named Potter. Then you could see panic start in the Muggle world. This bears all the hallmarks of Augustus Rookwood. That man is exceptionally clever and wasn't even suspected of being a Death Eater. The Ministry never thought to check the Department of Mysteries personnel. He was only caught because another Death Eater, Igor Karkaroff, gave the Ministry every name he knew at his trial to escape going to Azkaban. Sirius was sitting with his face in his hands. He knew his godson pretty well now, certainly well enough to understand his reaction to these circumstances. This is a nightmare and one I don't know how to help him with. All his training, physical, magical and tactical, is rendered useless. We're reduced to sitting waiting on the Muggle news reporting an attack on another family with the same surname. How easy would it be to find addresses of Muggles named Potter? The new Muggle Studies professor aimed that question at the one person there. He was sure would know the answer. Dan didn't disappoint, though his answer brought no comfort. Ridiculously easy. You've seen the phone book in our house. Every home has one. All you have to do is open that book to find anyone named Potter in our area. All the names are listed alphabetically, with the addresses right beside them. At that, Dobby appeared with the phone book from Crawley, and Sirius had to agree that Dan was spot on. It took the marauder less than a minute to flip the directory to the correct page and see all the information right in front of him. Amelia was also disheartened by this news. You say every house has one of these. They're updated every couple of years and a new one gets delivered free to your house. Copies are also in public buildings like libraries and post offices, even some telephone boxes have them. Remus summed up the bad news for all of them. So Muggles called Potter are easy to find, and there are so many we couldn't possibly protect them all from attacks. Choke's growl was back in full force. Amelia, I intend to use every resource I can to find these two if we do find them, though the nation might just want to take them down. There is no greater crime to a goblin than that of deliberately harming a child. Murdering a little girl just because her last name is Potter would see them fed to the Gringotts dragons while still alive. Lucas had returned in time to hear and totally agree with that opinion. For what they did to that innocent family and that innocent young man in there, I'll feed them to those dragons myself. He's had one hell of a shock and is trying to blame himself for the attack. The girls are having none of it. He's lying on his bed and holding on to Hermione like she's some kind of security blanket. He'll be okay. He was in much the same state after sneaking into Azkaban and discovering Sirius was innocent. Loud cries of "What?" greeted Dan's statement until Barchoke confirmed it. It wasn't difficult, he just kept his hood up and spoke with me in our own tongue. That was nearly 2 years ago, though, and Harry was a good bit smaller then. I don't think we could pull it off now. Hermione managed to put him back together on that occasion. She'll do so again. Harry will shortly be here and looking for answers we don't currently have to give. Draco had listened as intently as everyone there and thought something was being missed. He now felt confident enough in this company to offer his opinion too. It would certainly be a different perspective. I think there's something that needs to be mentioned, the effect this news will have on the other Death Eaters. My father would have laughed his head off at 3 dead Muggles and taken even greater delight in knowing this news would hurt Harry too. The thing is, there are a lot more just like how he used to be still out there. With all eyes now focused on him, Draco faltered until encouraged by Sirius. We all know you've made your choice, Draco, but you also have insights that none of us here do. Taking a deep breath, he continued with what had struck him. I was thinking of how this should be turned around in the press, rather like you did with the breakout of Azkaban. I'm not sure how it could be done, but you need to discourage others from joining these two. Barchoke thought that was a brilliant idea and certainly supported it. He was now only half listening though, while trying to think of ways the nation could help his children. His children were currently lying on top of Harry's bed, enveloped in each other's embrace. Emma had eventually led the other 2 girls away, recognizing that the couple would need some time alone to sort this out amongst themselves. Harry's voice was barely above a whisper as he spoke. Hermione, how can anyone murder a little girl? Hermione was gazing into those green eyes she loved so much and felt as if she could actually touch Harry's soul. Behind the drive and determination, the muscles and armor, there was a kind and caring, wonderful young man that she fell in love with. This was Harry with his guard right down, her Harry who didn't have all the answers, a Harry she unfortunately had no answers to give. I don't know, Harry. I can only guess that's why they're considered terrorists. They are prepared to do anything to further their cause. No cause in the world can ever justify murdering a 6-year-old little girl. They are murderers, plain and simple. You were right that day in Hogwarts, when you said they shouldn't be duelled, but shot in the back if we could. They have no honor, and deserve the same chance they gave their victims. None. Hermione could see the spark return to Harry's eyes and just had to kiss him. Either I need to get up to brush my teeth before taking this further, or we need to get out of here. Blushing, Hermione reluctantly opted for the second option. People are worried about you, Harry. It wouldn't be right to leave them worried while we're in here snogging our brains out. I know, but I like the sound of snogging our brains out. Harry gave her a grateful smile for being there for him again. Then he got serious. I can't really lie on a beach while terrorists are murdering people back in Britain. Having the wizarding public believe I was in hiding would be a disaster. What about Egypt next week? Next week is important from a goblin perspective. Cairo is the center of all Gringotts banking for that part of the world, and we will be attending a few functions while there. They will be curious to see an ambassador whose non-goblin-born son is also a centurion. Then there's the centurion's mate, a friend of the nation and Order of Merlin first-class holder. Add in Neville, Padma, Henrika, and Tonks to complete a bunch of celebrities that will have the local goblins coming out to gawk. Our group is going to get insights into the nation that will make your head spin. The repayment is we have to attend a function or two to meet and greet. This actually had Hermione giggling. A goblin charm offensive? I didn't think that was even possible. Harry answered by leaning in and kissing his mate. We goblins can be charming when we want to be. Now I need to visit the bathroom, brush my teeth, and then go see our family. Luna had barely taken her eyes off the door to their beach chalet, so it was hardly surprising that she was first to see the couple emerge. That they were hand in hand was only to be expected. Hermione's smile, though, told Luna that everything was going to be getting back to normal soon. Alecto wondered if things would ever be normal again. These two escaped from Azkaban and then just turned up on their doorstep, before moving in and practically taking over their home, supplying clothes, food, unregistered wands, and coughing up gold for books by owl order were just some of the impositions that had been forced upon Alecto and her brother. Then these two began attacking Muggles, unleashing who knows what by way of ministerial retribution. Last night, the latest Potter family to be targeted turned out to be nothing more than an elderly couple, with one foot already in the grave. That didn't seem to matter, though, to their uninvited guests. Rookwood and Lestrange came home and celebrated as if they'd just won a great victory. They didn't even have the courtesy to use silencing charms. Alecto promised herself she would be burning those sheets when they eventually left. If that's how they celebrated after murdering a couple of geriatrics, Alecto didn't think the house would remain standing with what they might get up to if they actually achieved something worthwhile. The feeling of impending doom that had settled in the pit of her stomach from the moment she laid eyes on the pair of escaped convicts suddenly grew to the size of a quaffle as Alecto read the front page of this morning's Prophet. This was really bad. Fudge had called an emergency meeting of the Wizengamot, and Alecto was struggling to believe the measures they had managed to push through. That there was a kiss on sight, order for the Dementors on these two, wasn't surprising. The rest was shocking. The Lestrange fortune had been swallowed up by the Ministry of Magic and would be used to help protect those citizens most at risk of attack from Death Eaters. While this was bad news, it was merely the beginning of the horror contained here. The Ministry had also authorized its Auroras to use lethal force in the apprehending of Augustus Rookwood and Bellatrix Lestrange, passing what amounted to a death sentence on both of them. The Auras wouldn't be using any of the unforgivables, but would now have no worries about facing any accusations of using excessive force. They had just been given carte blanche to hit both escaped prisoners with everything they had. Any Auras coming face to face with the escaped Death Eaters would certainly do just that. It was the final part of the article, though, that saw Electo's breakfast threatening to make a reappearance. That same lethal level of force was also authorized against anyone assisting Rookwood or Lestrange. The minister himself spelled it out in language a 4-year-old couldn't misunderstand. The ministry have been moving our country forward, but also taking great care to preserve our past. This is part of our past, though, that we have no intention of revisiting. Death Eaters serve the self-proclaimed Dark Lord, Tom Riddle. This is a wizard whose sole purpose is to overthrow the legal government of our country, while setting himself up as supreme ruler over all of us. This, simply put, is treason, and the penalties for such acts are clearly laid down in our laws. Those taking part in any such insurrection will be tried, and after being found guilty, put to death. Their family name will be disowned, and they will lose at least 90% of any lands, homes, possessions, and gold their family owned. Any terrorist who wants to overthrow my government will find us standing waiting and ready for them, and even death won't spare them from our retribution. Anyone considering joining these criminals in their campaign of murdering innocents, please believe this warning. It's the only one you're going to get. Alecto believed it. She believed every bowel-loosening word of it. The Carrows may not have much to lose in the way of wealth, but she had no intention of losing her life, just so these two could kill some muggers named Potter. These muggles they were randomly choosing weren't even related to the brat they were supposedly trying to terrorize. Both Alecto and her brother tried to tell them that this Harry considered himself a goblin, and when did a goblin ever give a shit about what happened outside Gringotts? At that, Amicus staggered in the door. It would seem, though, that pain rather than fire whiskey was responsible for his condition. The quaffle in her stomach became a bludger as she listened to what her brother had to say. I tried to contact Narcissa Malfoy but couldn't get anywhere near the manor. The pain in my mark was nearly as bad as the night the Dark Lord gave it to me. I approached from 3 different sides and got the same result every time. Malfoy Manor now has wards that refuse access to anyone who carries the dark mark. I think those wards would be lethal if you forced your way through. That's something I definitely don't want to be trying. Alecto pushed today's profit across to her brother while wondering how Bella would react to these double blows. Describing Bellatrix Lestrange as mercurial was a real understatement. She could transform from laughing to lethal in the blink of an eye. When Bella was in a lethal mood, only the Dark Lord could control and focus her ire on a victim of his choice. With only the 4 of them in the house, that ire would have to go somewhere. Not for the first time, Alecto found herself wondering whatever possessed them to join the ranks of the Death Eaters. They had seen no power, glory, or wealth head in their direction. Instead, they were now saddled with crazy Bella and her bedmate living under their roof. As if that wasn't bad enough, Alecto was beginning to wonder if they would survive Bella hearing this news. Severus had heard his name called out, and a cold shiver of dread ran down his spine. 4 warriors wanted him to accompany them to an as-yet undisclosed location. They gave him a moment to inform his supervisor what stage the potion he was working on had reached before escorting him from the lab. His nerves didn't improve any when he was shown into a plush office and recognized the goblin who had summoned him. It would have been difficult not to know the most recognizable goblin in Britain. Ambassador Barchoke, how can I be of help? The goblin kept the Death Eater waiting a moment for an answer, and then asked a question of his own. You have 4 years of your sentence remaining to be completed. Are you still enjoying your time as a guest of Gringotts? After having to deal with the Dark Lord, Severus was a master at not letting his emotions show. That wasn't to say he didn't have those emotions, though, and his current emotions were mostly fear. He was quite proud that his voice held steady as he answered, I am certainly enjoying my time spent as a guest of the nation. You have been such generous hosts that I am hoping some arrangement could be reached after my allocated time is over. I can make that happen. I can even arrange for you to speak Goblin like a citizen. Barchoke left those temptations hanging just out of reach before showing Snape the other side of the coin. I can also arrange a transfer to the Dragon Pits, where you will spend the next 4 years, if you survive that long, working at manually mucking out the pens. The choice of Potions Lab or the Dragon Pens is entirely in your own hands. I obviously want something you have. Give it to me and we will have a deal. Refuse and you are no longer of any use to me. You will leave this office and begin working in the pens today." There was not one shred of doubt in Severus's mind that this goblin was anything but 100% serious. He just hoped that he actually had what Barchoke wanted. He had learned that goblins weren't ones to accept excuses. If he didn't have what Barchoke wanted, then it would be the dragon pens for Severus Snape. "Again, how can I help? Lestrange and Rookwood have gone to ground. I want to unearth them. What I want from you is the names of every Death Eater you know and the locations of any safe houses. Give me this information and you can go straight back to the potions lab." Barchoke never reiterated what would happen if Severus refused. He didn't need to. "If this information helps us catch these bastards, I can guarantee your stay in the nation for as long as you want. I can also guarantee you would be speaking our language fluently as one of us within a week of their capture." There was parchment, ink and a quill already sitting at the desk. Severus was soon using all three to regurgitate every name and location he knew of. The goblin hid his smile well. Barchoke hadn't had a lot to smile about lately. These bastards thought they could terrorize his son by killing muggles and writing on walls. It was time to go on the offensive. He had Rita standing by, waiting on this Death Eater's list. She would then use her unique talents to pay these people and places a flying visit. Rita was well aware of the danger involved, but her emergency port key would rip through any wards the Death Eaters have should she need to get out fast. She was also being well paid for sticking her nose into this dangerous situation. With the promise of the ministry reward should she locate them and a front row seat at their capture, Rita would be able to quadruple her earnings from Barchoke with an exclusive article on the demise of the Death Eaters. He had also been instrumental in arranging another article that would appear in tomorrow's Prophet, one more step in the process of applying pressure to these bastards in the hope they got careless. Barchoke wanted them brought down in the worst possible way and would happily wield a blade himself if necessary. The goblin would need his caring face for later when the Muggle-born parents were meeting in Gringotts. They didn't need much convincing to attend. The Muggle press didn't know anything about Death Eaters but had dubbed Lestrange and Rookwood as the Potter Killers, with Ministry of Magic supplied pictures of the duo plastered all over their front pages. The story the press had been fed was very close to the truth. Here were a pair of terrorists that had killed while escaping from a classified maximum security prison. They had been sentenced to spend the rest of their lives in this prison after a young couple called Potter were brutally murdered. The Potters were survived by their baby son, now a teenager and the main target for these killers. They were basically offering the Muggle-born families free protection from the killers that were plastered all over their news media. Since everyone involved basically wanted the same thing, to keep them all safe, Barchoke thought it would be a very cordial and somewhat short meeting. Cornelius was currently briefing Amelia and Amos on a very cordial meeting he and Arthur had with representatives of the Muggle government. They seemed impressed with our suggestions, offering to foot the bill though easily sealed the deal. Arthur will be working closely with their team, but everybody in Britain with the surname Potter will be relocated by next week. The sheer amount of organizing this would take left Amos questioning the timescale, but Cornelius was confident it would be achieved. They are being moved to holiday locations all around the country, in some cases moving abroad or staying with relatives. With families who want to move permanently to another home, their current properties will be purchased immediately, giving them funds to purchase another. Their government is sorting out any employment issues the adults might have while the children are all on holiday from school. With the massive amount of publicity surrounding these murders, everyone desperately wants to be seen to be helping. Amelia had a fierce grin as a thought just struck her. I'd pay a month's salary to see that bitch Lestrange's face when she discovers her former vault is helping to pay for all this. Barchoke assures me the Lily Potter Foundation will pick up any shortfall. He's as keen as we are that no more Potters should die. I was the one who had to give Harry the news of the first murders. His father will do anything to prevent a repeat of that scene. Can I assume we have no problems if the goblins get to them first? The minister was quick to reassure Amelia that certainly wouldn't be a problem. I don't care if these two are shot full of centaur arrows when we get them, I just want them taken care of. Amos then had a question that he thought Amelia would be able to answer. Cedric says their holiday to Egypt is still going ahead. Do you know if that's right? Yes, they came home early from the island and are giving Japan a miss. But Cairo sounds wonderful. I'm really sorry to miss it. I can't really cancel all or leave and then bugger off on holiday myself though. Both Cornelius and Amos knew there were department heads in the ministry who wouldn't dream of imposing the same standards on themselves as those of their subordinates, just as they knew Amelia wouldn't even consider doing otherwise. Amelia then had to leave. She was standing in for the exceedingly busy Arthur Weasley as the ministry's representative at the Muggle-born meeting soon to be held in Gringotts. Gringotts had really went out of their way to impress the Muggle-born's parents by allowing their meeting to take place in the Grand Chamber. Harry led his family over to the tableau he'd championed at his Centurion inauguration. He and his father respectfully stood in silence with their head bowed for a few minutes. Emma was captivated by the tableau, the highly crafted blend of sculpture and painting bringing the scene to life in a way that was almost religious. She had no trouble comparing this to some of the great religious paintings from history. This certainly should be considered as a work of art. Emma thought she understood why Harry was drawn to this scene. It somewhat mirrored his own experiences. Wizards trying to impose their will on people by a campaign of terror before being brought forth to face justice. That women and children were involved as victims just made the comparison all the more poignant. Along with Luna and Tonks, Emma led Harry and Hermione to seats in the audience while Dan and Barchoke made their way to the stage. Harry was delighted when Amelia and Professor McGonagall joined them on stage as the meeting was now ready to start. Colin and his family had headed straight for them and he was currently having his ears talked off by two hyper-excited Creevy brothers. Minerva was going to open the proceedings, thank everyone for coming and then pass over to Amelia for the ministry's view of this. Barchoke would cover the technical side of the procedure before Dan dealt with the practicalities of Muggles living in a warded house. Minerva had met most of the parents of the Muggle-borns before. It was usually her who followed up on their Hogwarts letter. She thanked everyone for attending and gave a very brief explanation of just who Lily Potter was and why the foundation was set up. Amelia followed with a short history of the Dark Lord and his Death Eaters. One part of her presentation, though, really struck home with the parents. These terrorists targeted the Muggle-born families last time with devastating effectiveness, probably because they had infiltrators inside the ministry supplying them with those names and addresses. The ministry is now protected by the very same wards that we are today offering to erect around your homes. No Death Eater will ever set foot there again. We want you to accept the same level of protection for your family. A goblin addressing Muggle parents of witches and wizards inside the Gringotts Grand Chamber ticked so many first boxes that Barchoke didn't even bother counting. He apologized beforehand if anyone had any experience of wards, but was going to treat this as if this was their first introduction of the term. Wards are basically like an invisible shield that we place around your home, a shield that can then be adjusted to meet your own requirements. Although barring anyone with a dark mark is a compulsory function of these wards, you still get to decide which witches or wizards are allowed in your home. I'll now place you in Dan Granger's very capable hands. He and his wife are both dentists while their daughter Hermione is the first witch in their family. Dan stood for a moment before speaking. I know exactly how you're all feeling at this moment in time. My wife and I were faced with exactly the same decision almost 2 years ago. Accepting our daughter as a witch was easy compared to the thought that she could be in danger, because there were certain people who wanted to see her new best friend murdered. He actually smiled at the memory of that meeting. Harry's father told me that Gringotts was covered in these wards, but the ones on our house would protect something far more precious than gold. How can any father argue against logic like that? This raised a few laughs before Dan delved into the practicalities of having these wards. We have a ledger in the house that Hermione has to enter a witch or wizard's name before they are allowed onto our property. Only certain owls are allowed through too, unless they are also entered in the ledger. Apart from sleeping safer at night, I haven't found a downside to these wards, and forget they are there for most of the time. I also know that should someone be foolish enough to attempt to break through our wards, a squad of goblin warriors would be on my doorstep long before they managed their task. Amelia stood again and told their audience she had the very same wards erected on her own home and, like Dan, slept sounder at night because of them. She then asked if they had any questions, making it plain that only questions on the warding of their homes would be answered. She had no intention of letting them focus on the Potter killers. That last bit disappointed a lot of people yet, since they were about to have their families protected from this very real threat for free. There were no complaints. As the meeting ended, there were goblin tellers present to book appointments for each family to have their home warded. Professor McGonagall led Harry Barchoke and the three Grangers over to greet the McDonalds, introducing Roy, Mary, and little Natalie. Roy was like a fish out of water and appeared to be searching for any point of common reference he could grasp. That this boy's mother and girlfriend were both like his Natalie, the first witches in their family, helped. He also couldn't help but notice how many of the other kids had made their way over to the lad to say hello, and a few even thanked him for cutting his holidays short to do this. Roy decided the best way to deal with his misgivings was just to put his cards on the table right up front, not knowing this would only endear him to his goblin hosts. "I'll give it to you straight, Sonny. I was brought up to believe that no one gives you something for nothing. I want to know right now what this will really cost my Natalie." Harry had signaled for Luna and Colin to come over. Colin's family coming along too. This is Luna Lovegood and Colin Creevy, last year's recipients of the Potter scholarships. I would ask the same of Natalie as I did of them. They should do their best while at Hogwarts, and then act as mentors for the following year's students. I hope to create something here where all scholarship students look after the younger members. Nothing more, but certainly nothing less. Seeing the sparkle in his daughter's eyes at that helped Roy and Mary, as did meeting the Creevies and Grangers. This meeting was certainly settling some of their fears. The professor then put most of the remaining worries to bed. I was aware of Centurion Crow's ambitions for this project right from the start, and thought his goals were admirable. I then spent the year watching closely as they then overachieved in every single one of those goals. The entire first year fell under their spell, and now act like members of a family. They all look out for each other, and last year saw them set the best disciplinary record for a year group at Hogwarts in the castle's long history. This scholarship program is helping reshape Hogwarts, and I'm positive Natalie will fit right in and really enjoy her time with us. Harry then switched his attention fully to the little girl who was almost hiding in full sight, standing behind her parents and with her long black hair pulled over to practically obscure her facial features. "What do you think about this, Natalie?" Her voice was quiet, but all could hear the doubt contained there. "Am I really a witch?" It was a sympathetic Hermione who held her hand out to the younger girl, physically drawing her out of her parents' shadows. "I know exactly how you feel. I was worried it was all some cruel joke someone was playing on me, right up until I held my wand in my hand. Then I knew it was real, and I actually was a witch. We're meeting Pauline Knott, the other scholarship student, and a few of our friends when we leave here, but I think our first stop after that should be to get you your wand. What do you think?" The excitement fairly sparkled in the young witch's eyes as the Creevies and McDonald's warding appointments were quickly arranged. Now it was time for Natalie's magical adventure to begin. It wasn't excitement that sparkled in Dragontooth's eyes, rather pure, unadulterated hatred as he paced up and down in agitation. Only the fact this was their apartment stopped him breaking anything. "Filthy humans in our grand chamber. I saw it for myself. And still can't believe it. They should have been slaughtered and served up to the dragons for daring to even look upon the sacred carvings, and those who permitted this atrocity should have their ears and noses sliced off, forced to forever live with their shame." He spun round to face his father. Of course they were there, the ugly bitch and her parents. "Please tell me it will be soon, father. The shame that she cut me burns worse than any wound. I want my revenge." Bloodfang was every bit as incensed as his son, just not as impulsive. "Patience, patience, patience. Have you learned nothing? Everyone is on high alert at the moment because of these escaped Death Eaters. We need to let that settle before we act. But father, I had the perfect time all picked out. The ugly bitch's birthday is in September. We could ruin this and every birthday she has left with the memory of her slaughtered parents." Bloodfang liked that idea. He liked it a lot but wasn't prepared to commit to that date just yet. We'll see, we'll see. This appeased his son. We'll see usually meant yes, and Dragon Tooth could hardly wait for his revenge on the ugly bitch, and Crow. Nothing was going to appease Bella this morning. It was almost as if someone had designed today's edition of The Prophet to push all of her buttons at the same time. Details of how the Muggle government were rapidly protecting everyone in Britain named Potter were hard to swallow. That Lestrange Gold was helping to protect those Potter Muggles started her blood on its journey toward boiling point. The Muggle-born Protection Act, again, with the name Potter behind it, only increased the temperature of that volatile substance. Seeing pictures of the brat in Diagon Alley, casually shopping without a care in the world, practically had steam coming out her ears. That the Longbottoms and her fucking nephew were in the pictures too, almost had Bella totally losing it, turning the page to see some goblin and the minister presenting McGonagall with her master's precious cup, was always going to launch her right over the edge. A scream of rage rang out as her borrowed wand incinerated the offending newspaper, and also burnt a hole right through the table it was sitting on. My master's precious possession, they fucking gave it away. I'll kill them, I'll kill all of the fuckers, and get it back. It won't do you any good, you know. In the blink of an eye, Bella had swung her wand to point at her mate. And what do you know of it? You're supposed to be so fucking clever, yet the bastards are one step ahead of us at every turn. Somehow the goblins discovered our master had made Horcruxes. They've been searching for them since that Halloween night. They are so confident in themselves. They've even allowed details to be published in a book. The little bastards would surely have found one stored in a Gringotts vault and removed our master's essence from it. That was nothing more than a piece of gold they handed over to Hogwarts. Rookwood was also certain that specific picture was included in the newspaper, purely to garner this very reaction from Bella. Her racing off on a berserker killing spree could see all of them doomed. Bella's splintered mind had jumped off in another direction entirely, though. That stupid bastard Lucius, he must have known all this, and yet he still served them one of our master's most precious possessions up on a plate. I should have taken my time killing the bastard. His death was far too merciful. No wonder my fucking sister hides behind wards that keep me out. I'll deal with that bitch and her Potter-loving spawn too. All could see the killing lust broadcasting from every pore of Bella's features. Rookwood attempted to give that killing lust some less dangerous focus. Less dangerous to them, that is. What we do now is switch tactics and targets. Back to what we do best, the four of us turn up unannounced and kill every fucker in the targeted place. Augustus could see he had reached Bella with that. She would contain her rage until their attack tonight. Then they would need to begin searching for their master. Even in her clearly emotionally distressed state, Bella had still hit on the truth of the matter. This was not the ministry they were used to dealing with. The ministry's cooperation with the goblins was bad news for their cause too. Without their master's immense powerful backing, Rookwood knew it would only be a matter of time before they were tracked down. Tracking was also at the forefront of his thoughts. If they could now ward against the dark mark, the next logical step would be to discover a way to track it. He had been ordering books on arithmancy and runes to help him devise such a system, though Augustus intended to use their dark marks to locate the person who permitted them the honor of bearing them. After tonight's attack, he would need to turn all his attention to that. Neither he nor Bella had been paying any attention in the direction of the Carrows. Otherwise they couldn't have missed the siblings' clearly horrified expressions. Alecto and Amicus wanted nothing to do with any raid or murdering muggles. They also knew better than to disagree with Bella when she was in this kind of mood. Only a complete moron offers death an invitation, and that's what would be coming their way if they dared to voice their opinions. They may survive this raid, they certainly wouldn't live through saying no to Bellatrix Lestrange when she was bubbling with anger and had a wand already in her hand. Donald and Julie were saying goodnight to their friends in the pub. Neither was much of a drinker, but when you lived in a small village like Cockington, this was where you came to meet with your friends and generally socialize. After many years of working and living in the hustle and bustle of London, being able to retire to a sleepy little village in Devon had been a dream come true for the couple. Discovering that they were here to stay, and not just buying a holiday cottage for weekends and the odd break, saw the couple gain instant acceptance from the other residents of the village. That last year saw Donald retiring after 30 years plus service in the Metropolitan Police was really all the credentials the couple needed to be trusted by the locals. Donald was about to open the pub door for his wife, only to discover it wouldn't budge an inch. "Hey, Sam, you having a lock-in tonight?" "It's just as well he retired, Julie. A copper should know you only have a lock-in after last orders. It's just gone 10 o'clock. I can tell the time, I can't budge the door, though." Since Donald was 6'2" and had played rugby for his division, the former policeman was receiving a fair bit of gentle ribbing from their friends about his physical prowess, or apparent lack of. Except for the group in the back playing pool, this was now providing entertainment to the couple of dozen other patrons of the pub. Helpful suggestions were being shouted out as the younger and wiry-built Sam made his way from behind the bar to sort the problem, only to discover that both of them pushing together couldn't budge the thing. The small distorted glass panes in the door might have added a bit of character to the old-world design of the pub. They certainly weren't there to give patrons a good view through them. Even so, both Donald and Sam clearly saw the flashes of light that shot out from the darkness and must have struck the pub somewhere above where they were situated. While the jammed door now took on a far more sinister connotation for Donald, Sam was far more worried about what those beams could mean. "I don't know what those lights were, but they certainly hit the thatched roof." His worst fears seemed to be borne out, though, as flickering orange-yellow light began to be reflected in the distorted glass panes, and then the first whiff of smoke reached their nostrils. Both then hit the door hard with their shoulders, but they might as well have tried to burst their way through the foot-thick pub walls for all the effect they had. "Where are the emergency exits?" Sam pointed Donald in the direction of the toilets while he shot off to check the one at the back of the pool lounge. Julie had been married to her police officer for over 30 years. Seeing Donald with his game face on was not something she expected after their retirement move to be near the coast. She wasn't about to panic, though. They were, after all, just down the village pub and spending the evening having a quiet drink with friends. Seeing her husband as he emerged from his frantic search for another exit told Julie the situation might be far more serious than she first thought. Then she too got a whiff of the acrid smoke. Sam had obviously met with the same negative result, but Donald wasn't beaten yet. Not by a long way. As the smoke started to become more obvious to everyone, he quickly press-ganged the 5 biggest guys in the pub as they grabbed one of the oak tables and had it hoisted up onto their shoulders. On the count of 3, they desperately charged toward the nearest Georgian window, hitting it dead center only to bounce off and all hit the floor on their backs. Donald lay there as the panicked screaming began to surface all around him. The table should have easily crashed right through that delicate wooden framework holding the distorted glass panes and now be lying in the beer garden outside, leaving them with a viable exit from the pub. Getting to his feet and reaching for his wife, Donald couldn't help but notice that the air was already much fresher at ground level than head height. That's when his idea struck. Grabbing hold of the barman, Donald had to shake Sam a couple of times to get him to concentrate. "Sam, how does the pub get its barrels delivered?" "They bring them every Tuesday and drop them off in the cellar." At that, Sam understood what Donald was implying and raced off behind the bar. Whether that exit was available or not, they stood a far better chance of surviving until the fire brigade got here by making their way down into the cellar and seeking shelter from the smoke and heat. Donald began pushing folk in that direction. Most didn't want to go as it was deeper into the pub, but battering chairs off windows was having even less effect than the table had. The conditions inside the pub were deteriorating rapidly. It was getting very hot and visibility was down to under 2 feet. Donald was coughing rather than breathing. Now, as he physically pushed 3 struggling people behind the bar, he found his wife at the entrance to the cellar with a bar towel wrapped around her face as she directed people down the steps and into their proposed sanctuary. Whoever had done such a good job on the doors and windows had then missed the metal hatch on the ground that opened to allow for the delivery of beer barrels to the pub. Black metal doors on a tarred road surface at the back of the pub would have been easy to miss at night. Though not now, the blazing roof was throwing off more than enough light to illuminate Sam standing at the hatch and pulling those customers through who were struggling to make it on their own. The sight of that exit was more than enough to get folk moving that just a moment ago Donald was having to shove really hard. Just before passing Julie up to Sam, Donald removed her makeshift mask and gave her a quick kiss. "You come back to me, Donald Roberts, you hear me?" "Of course, love." As his wife left the cellar, she was replaced at the hatch by a bald-colored man in uniform. It may not have been one Donald recognized, but it was still a uniform, nonetheless. "What are you doing, sir?" "There are people still in that pub. The heat is bad and the smoke deadly, but I still have a chance of getting them out." "I can't let you do that." He wasn't about to accept that and angrily shouted up at the stranger. "Get your ass down here and help me then." Donald wrapped the bar towel around his face and thought his wife was a friggin' genius. It was like he was breathing fresh air. A shiver ran down his back and suddenly the heat wasn't bothering him either. And Donald also had company. The colored officer had taken his advice and followed him back into the pub. The smoke was thick enough to cut with a knife, yet Donald could easily breathe through the towel, but it was visibility that was the biggest problem. Using the pub's bar as his guide, they both set off for the pool room. Finding the people still in there turned out to be surprisingly easy. He fell over them as they had all passed out on the floor. Donald had an arm each from the first two people they found huddled against the fire exit, and was dragging them along the floor as burning parts of the ceiling started falling all around him. He thought the situation must be giving him strength, as Donald felt superhuman and the two unconscious bodies were shooting along the ground as if on casters. His accomplice, though, appeared to be going one better, and pushing the remaining three casualties rapidly toward the safety of the cellar. Sam and Julie were both waiting at the hatch and they had those two fellows out of there in seconds. His wife had clearly been speeding down the road to hysteria and wouldn't let Donald go the second he exited the hatch. Just as well his accomplice didn't seem to need any help, as the three people he'd rescued appeared to float through the life-saving opening. Willing hands quickly took the five away for medical treatment as the rescue party moved further from the now fiercely blazing pub. It took a lot to ignite a thatched roof, but once lit, it was almost impossible to stop it burning until all the thatch was consumed by the fire. Donald wanted to thank his mysterious accomplice. "What's your name, son? You did wonderful work in there." "Thank you, sir, it's Shacklebolt." "Sorry, but unit and such are all confidential." As they shook hands, the Auroras surreptitiously cancelled the bubblehead and flame-freezing charms he'd cast on the muggle. He'd already removed the featherlight charm from the victims they'd pulled out of the pub. As a former policeman, Donald always had another question. What's a special unit doing in a tiny place like Cockington? The Aura indicated toward the front of the burning building. "I think the name of the pub you were just in should give you that answer." Donald, Julie and Sam all glanced toward the sign suspended from the 15-foot-high wrought iron stand across from the entrance. It was clearly visible now, illuminated by the flames of the burning pub. It boldly advertised, "The Potter's Arms." When the trio turned back to ask Shacklebolt some more questions, he had vanished into the night. Harry and Hermione had spent a rare night in Crawley and were enjoying their morning exercise routine, which today was a run around the town where Hermione grew up. They were leaving for Cairo tomorrow, but Hermione had an ulterior motive for their stay in Crawley. She wanted the family to go to church this morning. When they got married in non-magical society, Hermione wanted the service to take place in the church she'd attended since being a toddler. Being at Hogwarts meant they would only be able to attend church on a few occasions each year, but Hermione wanted Harry to be comfortable and get his face known by the rest of the parishioners. She had no idea how known Harry would be by the end of today's service. Harry enjoyed the singing in church, especially Hermione's lovely voice, and was ignoring all the glances in their direction. Hermione, too, was relatively immune to people staring at them. 2 years of being by Harry's side had built her tolerance levels up. Dan and Emma, though, had only experienced this phenomenon when they accompanied their children into the magical community. Having people stare in their direction was certainly not how their Sunday mornings at church usually progressed. As the service ended, Melissa and Joanne made a beeline for the couple. "Hermione, we really need to speak to you. Are you going to be home for long?" Sorry, Melissa, we leave for Egypt in the morning. This had Joanne groaning. It's really important, Hermione. You must have noticed everyone staring at you this morning. The Dursleys have been spreading rumors about Harry all over Crawley and nobody has been able to say they were wrong. The name Dursley instantly focused all four of their attentions. Would you girls like to come over for tea and you can tell us what this is all about? You need to clear this with your parents first, though. A pair of yes, Mrs. Granger saw both girls hurry off to see their parents, knowing both sets it was a foregone conclusion that they would have two visitors for tea. Both girls' mothers would be desperate to know what was going on, and Hermione was whispering this information to Harry as soon as the girls left. Anything said at tea today would be all over Crawley before they arrived in Cairo. Harry found the Reverend Richards a down-to-earth and very pleasant guy that all three Grangers clearly liked. The man was enough of a recommendation for him. Even here, though, they all detected questions the minister was dying to ask, but social politeness held him in check. Both girls plied the couple with questions on the 10-minute walk to the Grangers' home, Melissa's eyes nearly popping out of her head when she spotted the ring Hermione was wearing. Harry's answer, that it was an old family heirloom, had both girls just about swooning. Joanne found she was on no safer ground when asking them how their holidays had been. Harry's answer had both of them practically turning green with envy. Florida was a lot of fun since there was a whole gang of us there this year. I love seeing Hermione wearing the latest fashions. Shopping for them in Paris is something I'm hoping Dan can give me advice on how to dodge that painful experience next time. This earned a quick quip from the dentist. Leave Lavender and Parvati at home. The girl holding on to this gorgeous guy's arm, wearing his ring on her finger and giggling at her father's joke, bore no resemblance to the Hermione Granger Melissa and Joanne had known. Both could hardly wait to discover if the rumors about this Harry were true. Emma had hardly walked into the kitchen before she returned with a laden tray. Dobby, as usual, had prepared a spread with scones, jams and clotted cream, sharing the tray with a cake stand full of delights. Dan then collected the tea, coffee, and orange juice. The little guy had ready as they sat around the dining table. After both girls had lavished praise on the wonderful home baking, Hermione was ready to get down to business. You said there was something important we needed to know and mentioned the Dursleys. Joanne made sure to wipe any of that delicious cream and jam from her lips before speaking. The Dursleys are spreading it all around town that your Harry is the one the Potter killers are after. Seeing their shock at that, Melissa completed the tale. They're claiming they knew this would happen, which is why they never took their nephew in as a baby. They wanted to protect their own son from danger. It was an angry Harry who verbally cut across her. They were offered protection. Instead, they gave me up and moved house. Hermione's arms slipping around him allowed Harry to quickly calm. He certainly wasn't angry at these two girls. Melissa and Joanne appeared as if they'd been petrified, since both just stared at Harry without moving a muscle. He'd just admitted these murderers were actually after him. Hermione snuggled into her mate as he confirmed that he was the one they were after to the girls. I told Hermione that it might be dangerous being my friend the very first week we met, and she's still here. My father contacted Dan and Emma shortly after that, and they still allowed me to date their wonderful daughter. That's how a real family behaves, not by rejecting a member whose only crime is to survive their parents being murdered. I have no love for the Dursleys, but I don't hate them either. They really don't mean anything to me. My only concern here is that when this news gets out, it will paint a target over Crawley. This house has the best protective systems that money can buy, but no one else in town does. Knowing full well how quickly this news would spread, Emma thought they should again make sure it was their version of the truth that was being believed. A few days ago, we were all lying on a beach belonging to Harry. Actually, the entire island does. The point being that he raced back to Britain to ensure all his friends were protected. He and his father also arranged all the funding that allowed everyone named Potter in the whole of Britain to move somewhere safe. The Harry that we know is an entirely honorable young man, who we would be delighted to welcome to the family someday. I certainly couldn't say the same about Dudley Dursley. Neither girl could argue with that opinion, and both were certain their mothers would be overjoyed if either of them had brought Harry home as a boyfriend. Potter killers be damned. Harry was handsome, Clearly very wealthy, titled and honorable, both girls would settle for finding a boy with even one of those attributes. Just by having tea at the Grangers would see their status elevated amongst their peers. They'd met Harry and had news that would turn the town on its head. Crawley could become the center of the biggest news story in the country. Joanne tried for more information and asked if they had any plans after Cairo. Probably just spending time at our house in the Scottish Highlands, though I would like to attend church again before we return to school. I enjoyed that today. Melissa was thinking that news would certainly see a few more people attending the Reverend Robert's Sunday sermons, while Joanne had focused on Harry saying, "Our house." It would seem their relationship was even more serious than they thought. Shaq thought he was in serious trouble as Madam Bones asked for an explanation of his actions. 4 different incendios being cast at the same location set off the detectors. Our squad was on the scene less than 2 minutes after getting the alarm, but the Death Eaters had already gone, and the roof was beyond saving. Circling around to the back of the building, I noticed people escaping from a hatch in the ground, so went over to investigate. One person was determined to go back inside to rescue more people, and my choices were to let him go, stun him, or follow and help. I chose the latter. Did this muggle see you using magic? Absolutely not. The smoke was so thick inside the building that you could hardly see your hand in front of your face. I know we have a non-interference policy, Madam Bones, but those 5 people and probably the man who went back in to rescue them would all have died if I hadn't taken that action. You are not in trouble, or Shacklebolt, quite the opposite. I intend to see a commendation placed on your record for your actions last night, as well as using those actions to have alterations made to our policy. If we have auras on the scene who can save lives without breaking the statute of secrecy, then I want that to be our response. Even if it means we have to alter some memories later, I think that is a better option than standing there and letting people die when we could save them. This drew a wide smile from the aura. Thank you, Madam Bones, for the commendation and the policy change. I became an aura to help people, and last night that's what I did. That older gentleman was going back into that burning building, knowing there was a very good chance he wouldn't be coming back out. I just had to help him. Amelia handed her aura a copy of a Muggle newspaper where the fire was front-page news. That gentleman was a retired policeman. He may have retired, but that will to serve and protect and never leaves the good officers. You are a good officer, Oro Shacklebolt. Now take a couple of days off and enjoy yourself. He passed through the door of the director's office, a relieved man. Alecto sighed with relief as she passed through the door, just glad to be out of the house for a moment. It may be their house, but Bella and Augustus had made themselves right at home when they both had headed up the stairs. Alecto knew it was time to get out of there. She strolled down to the burn and sat dangling her feet off the bank, letting the sound of the running water soothe her jangled nerves. Amicus knew just where to find his sister. She'd been coming to this spot to be alone since she was a little girl. Alecto, you need to be more careful. We can't let our guests see how we really feel. Lestrange was a crazy witch before she was sent to Azkaban, but now she would kill you as soon as look at you. We're already dead, Amicus. It's just a matter of who actually does the deed. This shocked her brother back on his heels, that and seeing how worried his sister was about this. What do you mean dead? Bella killed her husband and both brothers-in-law when they escaped from Azkaban, and we've both heard her saying what she wants to do to her sister when she gets a hold of her. The crazy bitch will end the Caroline in a heartbeat and not give a shit about it afterwards. Those two have taken everything they want from us and will close anything that might lead the ministry to them before they leave. The same ministry will now group the Carrows along with those two, so there will only be death for us there too. Amicus desperately wanted to argue that his sister was wrong. He wasn't able to, but suggested a third option. What if we run away? Run away where? And to what? We've no gold, family or friends. You'll notice no other Death Eaters have come forward to help with their supposed terror campaign, so we're on our own. Where could we run to? Who would help us with the ministry and Lestrange wanting us dead? I just wish we'd known they didn't have wands when they first walked up that path. We could have killed them both and made off with the reward money. By the time we found that out though, Bella was too close, and she's every bit as deadly with a blade. A now disconsolate sibling joined his sister sitting on the bank while a jubilant bug was so excited that she nearly fell off the branch she was perched on. Rita had spotted the witch leaving the house while she was scouting the building and had followed purely on a hunch that had just paid dividends. She could now report back on the Death Eater's location without having to go anywhere near Bellatrix Lestrange, an unexpected and most assuredly welcome bonus. She flew away looking to get outside the wards and then intended to use her emergency portkey. It was her quickest way back to London and would certainly see her rapidly brought straight to Barchoke. The former unspeakable was all concentration as he meticulously inscribed the last rune into the parchment, using his own blood as ink. A quick spell saw the parchment glow silver and rotate slightly, aligning the top rune with north. Bella was trembling with excitement as she held her arm out, desperate to play her part in the ritual. Rookwood cut Bella's arm across her dark mark and let the resulting blood drip onto the parchment. Their excitement mounted as the blood then pooled together before expanding into a straight line that clearly pointed in a specific direction. Restraining herself while her lover carefully measured the angle of the line was one of the hardest things Bella had done in decades. Only after he'd written down the result could she let her exuberance have free rein. A thoroughly ruffled Augustus then listened to his mate's explanation for jumping him. That line of blood proves our master is still with us, and only the fact that I know you need that wonderful brain of yours to take another reading is stopping me shagging you senseless this very minute. You have 1 minute to come out with empty hands before we open fire. Amelia's amplified voice shattered the peace of the Dundee countryside, and would certainly be heard in every square inch of the Carrow house. They had wards up to stop anyone from entering or leaving the area, and Amelia had brought enough firepower to level the building if the occupants wanted to put up a fight. Part of her wanted to do that anyway, but she was too much of an aura not to give those inside the house an opportunity to surrender. She had the house surrounded, though, and wouldn't be taking any chances with the lives of her auras. She watched as both Carrows slowly emerged from the door, brother and sister with their empty hands held high in the air. At Amelia's signal both were dropped by stunners as Mad-Eye confirmed he couldn't see anyone else in the house. Another signal saw both casualties speedily dragged away and they wouldn't be revived until being searched and then manacled. As more of her team poured into the house, Alastair asked the question that was in all of their minds: could the information have been wrong? I doubt it. Barchoke's intelligence has never been wrong before, and he wants these two caught as much as we do. Her gaze had wandered to Rita and a photographer who were waiting on permission to enter the area, all that was forgotten though by a piercing scream coming from inside the house. Amelia actually found her way barred by Alastair. Looks to me like a booby trap and someone got careless. The last thing we need is you enter in that house. I would recommend we pull all the auras out of there and get some specialists here from the ministry. Amelia could only agree as one of her auras was led from the building with a badly burned hand. She would have to put the disappointment of not catching these two aside and see just what information they could garner from this. They were a step closer, and she would have to accentuate that positive for the press. As the two Carrows were revived, Amicus progressed from blustering to beseeching, finally giving begging a try as their wands were tested and both had incendo charms on them. His vocal attempts to save their lives was in stark contrast with stoic silence coming from his sister. Alecto appeared already resigned to her fate. At least Amelia had the satisfaction of knowing they had captured two of the people who had attacked the pub. She would just have to be satisfied with that. For now, a very satisfied Rookwood was lying back against a tree in the Forest of Dean and contemplating how much his life had changed in such a short time. The 600 miles plus between here and Dundee had given them two readings to work with. Simple triangulation on a map would give them a fairly approximate destination to begin their search, and taking further readings as they traveled should narrow their search area dramatically. While that achievement was certainly intellectually immensely satisfying, it paled into insignificance for Augustus compared to the witch currently snuggling into him. Bella had lived up to her promise and done her very best to shag his brains out the instant after he had noted down the second reading. So much so that they had found themselves resting under this magnificent oak. His silent contemplation was shattered as he shot to his feet and knocked Bella flying. She had her wand out and searching for danger as her lover removed something smouldering from his pocket. Or I knew my big strong wizard had the hots for me, but to actually see you burn is rather a nice compliment. I just hope nothing important is damaged down there, lover. You were certainly on fire, but you're not responsible for this. Someone just triggered the protection wards I had on all my notes, and would certainly have received a nasty burn for their troubles, as those notes turned to ashes. A nosy bitch. Alecto, I'll flay her alive if she's ruined all your hard work. I think it's time we took care of those bastards anyway. We had practically to imperious them to take part the other night. What's wrong with this fucked up country? Death Eaters not wanting to kill and torture muggles? I don't think it would be Alecto, love. She's far too terrified of you to go anywhere near our things. I think our time in Dundee is at an end. Whether we were discovered or sold out doesn't really matter anymore. I think we're safer staying off the beaten track and camping for now. A burglary to a shop selling such things is something we'll need to consider. They should also have maps, compasses, and all the supplies we need. Just by looking at those vectors, I'm certain we need to leave Britain, but we don't want to advertise that fact. So, no torturing and killing. I know. If you keep spoiling all my fun, then you are just going to have to keep me occupied in other ways. Bella's pretend pout and the things she was doing with her hands left Rookwood seriously worried that he wouldn't be up to that task. After the day they'd had, the group were worried that they wouldn't be up to the task tonight. Just arriving at where they would be staying for the next week was enough to blow the Weasley twins' minds. This wasn't a house but a palace. Marble and tiled surfaces everywhere in an attempt to keep the building cool, with even a fountain inside the house. Then they had gone out and the sights, sounds and smells of Cairo had Fred and George thinking they had landed in paradise. With Bill as the group's guide, they had seen places well off the tourist map, and the magical section was so full of exuberance and color that neither twin wanted to leave. They were imagining a shop like this plonked in the middle of Diagon Alley. It would be the talk of London, and their dream took a little more shape and form. Tonight they all had an official function in the Cairo branch of Gringotts to attend, and, as Barchoke had been summoned back to Britain, Harry was left to lead the party until his father caught up with them. Harry greeted the dignitaries as he entered, offering the ambassadors apologies, but the director himself had ordered the recall. They were impressed that his mate was fluent in their language and carried a goblin blade. They were astonished that her Muggle parents were fluent too. Word was rapidly spread around the bank to treat everyone here tonight as having the ability to understand their language. They would have been right. After the initial shock wore off, the bank officials felt greatly honored that the director had sent them such a group. Lords, ladies and muggles they may be, but all speaking their tongue gained them acceptance into their midst. Hermione was on Harry's arm as they mingled when a squeaky female voice behind them affected Harry like a bolt of lightning. "Do you remember me, Harry?" He had spun around and lifted the young female goblin right off her feet, the delight on his face clear for all to see. "Sapphire, of course I remember you. What made you think I could possibly forget? Oh, I just watched you arrive with your mate and all your friends. Centurion, would you kindly put my daughter down? We'd heard that things are changing in Britain, but that is still not considered appropriate behavior here." Harry placed the young female goblin back on her feet before turning to face her father. Performing the centurion's salute, he offered an apology. "I'm sorry, sir, there was no inappropriate intention on my part. I just hadn't seen my friend for 7 years and couldn't contain my delight. I didn't even consider she might be here tonight and hope you will allow us some time this week to catch up." The pleading eyes from his daughter left Goldskin no option to refuse, especially since the bank's officials were all watching and chuckling at his discomfort. "I shall try and arrange something," but Choke appearing at his shoulder left the goblin no wiggle room. "I know all our itinerary for the week, so when would Sapphire be available? She can join in with the rest of the group or we can make other arrangements. She would also be very welcome to come to Britain for a visit. There's always plenty to do in Kinkersey at Baron Crow's, and always plenty of chaperones ensuring that there is no inappropriate behavior. Have you met my son's mate? This is my daughter Hermione Granger, friend of the nation, Order of Merlin, first-class holder. That sword on her hip has tasted blood, both in duels and battles. She helped my son bring down a 1,000-year-old basilisk with it and brought honor and profit to Gringotts. Hermione hadn't a clue what was going on here, but both Harry and father had cut the legs from under this goblin. She continued that trend by bowing to Goldskin as an equal and watching as his eyes nearly popped out his head. I am always delighted to meet any friends of my mates and look forward to getting to know your daughter, Sapphire, better. The little goblin in question now wore a beaming smile. There may be a stern lecture waiting on her when they got home, but it would be worth it to spend some time with Harry and his friends. Her father took Sapphire away to discuss with her mother on the best time for their daughter to see her friend. A slight shake of Barchoke's head was enough to tell Harry he would have to wait until later for an explanation of what happened back home. He also knew Hermione wouldn't wait until later, so led her over to a quiet corner. A smile was all Emma needed to know she and Dan were invited too. The four stood sipping goblin ale, the adult Grangers screening their 2 children from the rest of the room. Sapphire was my friend. She was the only one who would sit next to me in class and refused to leave my side, no matter what anyone said. Harry's smile at that memory soon faded as what followed later needed to be faced. They couldn't get Sapphire away from my side, so they got her family to leave Britain, taking my only friend with them. I was 6 and shattered. I just couldn't understand what was happening until Dragonbreath explained it to me at school. He sauntered up and said her parents were worried their daughter would be contaminated by being near me, so it was my fault they had to take her away. Harry's voice had been getting lower as he spoke and was barely above a whisper as he recounted what happened next. I lost it as only a 6-year-old can. I punched, kicked, bit, scratched. That was the first time I beat the shit out of Dragonbreath. Dan appeared ready to congratulate him, but Harry soon put a stop to that. His family went mental, said I had no place inside Gringotts. The entire situation escalated until my father ended up in the pit fighting so I could stay. I lost the only friend I'd ever had, and Dragonbreath lost an uncle. We've hated each other ever since. Ever since that day, too, I sat alone in class because no other family wanted their son or daughter to get involved, until I went to Hogwarts. Hermione had caught the occasional glimpse of the darker side to Goblin society, but her parents appeared shocked. School disagreements, resulting in parents fighting to the death, was not something they wanted to consider. She had another question for her mate though. I understand your reaction to Sapphire. I would have killed for a friend like that when I was 6. Why the hostility toward her father though? We know Bloodfang was behind the move. Whether gold, coercion, or both was involved, we don't know. But her father set the whole thing in motion. Goldskin didn't like me then, and it seems his opinion hasn't changed any since. Neither me becoming a centurion or a baron has had any effect. My father must have enjoyed rubbing his nose in how proud he is of our Hermione. I think that was Goldskin's greatest fear, but Sapphire and me were only 6. Dan didn't think this was the time or place to point out he and Hermione were only 11 when they met, and now they were mates for life. He may have liked to change a few things in these last 2 years, but dragging his daughter to another continent to get her away from Harry wouldn't have even made the list of things Dan wished he'd done. Hermione had her arm around her mate, offering support and love. Well, she's here now and seems keen to renew your friendship. Not that I blame her. I can't wait to talk with Sapphire and find out what you were like as a little boy. This earned her a quick kiss before it was back to mingling. Harry had been looking forward to this trip, but meeting Sapphire just made the entire holiday so much more. At the very least, they would be writing to each other from now on. He had no intention of losing touch with her again. A squeeze of his arm had Harry bending his head so Hermione could whisper in his ear, "So have I gained another sister?" Harry glanced over to where Hannah, Susan, Parvati and Luna were hanging out with their 4 older friends, all under the watchful eyes of Lucas and Moa. He could only smile before giving Hermione a quick kiss on the cheek. "Thanks for understanding." "I do understand, Amelia. That doesn't mean I have to agree with you and Cornelius on this matter." This left the witch in question shaking her head. Amos was being stubborn and it could be very costly. "I do see your point, Amos. The Carrows were nothing more than low-level Death Eaters and wouldn't have been involved if the other 2 hadn't shown up on their doorstep. On that we all agree." If Amos thought he was winning this argument, then he didn't really know Amelia Bones. She was just getting warmed up. Now let's list what else we know. Did they supply food and shelter to the two most wanted murderers in Britain? Yes. Did they arm these most wanted murderers with wands? Yes. Did they take part in the raid on that Muggle pub and fire curses that set the building on fire? Yes. Did they know what the punishment would be for such an act before they set out? Again, yes. We have their very own testimony to confirm those facts. They're guilty, Amos. I never doubted their guilt for a second. I just don't know if I can support the death penalty over this. The Minister of Magic understood the Chief Warlock's reluctance. But unless they showed a united front on this matter, Cornelius feared they would be defeated in the chamber. We've heard from Barchoke that his intelligence reported our stance on this matter actually stopped Death Eaters joining Rookwood and Lestrange. A deterrent only works, though, when people actually believe we will carry out our threats. Look at this another way. We have bent over backwards trying to appease these people, and our strategy has been working. We avoided a war because we left their families alone, and it's those same families we need to protect now. We've shown them the positive side and what can happen when they cooperate with us. Now we need to show them that we're serious about what happens when you stand and plot against the ministry. Amuse. Our children are currently holidaying with Harry, and both of us are delighted at that. We have to show others of their age that becoming a Death Eater will not solve all your problems. It will instead cost you your life. It may have been underhanded to bring their children into this argument, but Amelia thought it was necessary. Nothing was more important to Amos than his son. The Malfoy and Nott families appear to be making the right choices. If we want to stop another war that will include our children, then I feel strongly that this is what we have to do. I don't like it any more than you do. But to keep my Susan safe, I'll do what needs to be done. If we allow another war to start, there is no doubt that Harry will be at the center of it, and our children will stand with him. Susan and Cedric were placed in Hufflepuff for a reason, Amos. Their loyalty can't be questioned, and they will stand with their friends. 2 dead Carrows I can live with, but those children are all we have left from the last war. Our task here is to stop there being another. A nod was all the signal given that she had won her argument. Amos's support might be reluctant, but it was vital if they were going to pull this off. Goldskin thought he'd hit upon a way for his daughter and her peers to see these people for what they really were, nothing more than a failing director's pathetic attempt to show Britain in a good light. Goldskin made the bargain that he would allow Sapphire to spend some time with them if they in turn would take part in a class question and answer session at the school. This group had made quite an impression, and he intended to see that positive impression torn down in an environment where young goblins would ask the questions that adults really couldn't. At least not without those adults being challenged with blades. Goldskin was rather surprised, though, at how quickly his offer had been accepted, and just how keen they appeared to do this. They were actually turning up at the school this morning. Barchoke led Harry, Hermione, Neville and Padma into the class. Tonks, of course, was still on protection duty and brought up the rear. While his son was in full Centurion regalia, the other 3 were sporting their dueling robes and all, of course, wore their swords. Goldskin was laboring over introducing them to the class, saying that the students shouldn't let their guests' nervousness stop them asking the questions they really wanted to. While having no idea, these 4 faced and taught a much larger defense class every week. Whatever this goblin was up to, Barchoke was certain his children and their 2 friends could cope with it. He intended to stand back and enjoy the show. Seeing they were actually going to be talking to Sapphire's class had Harry really looking forward to this. Hermione, of course, had a lesson planned for this morning, depending on what other plans Goldskin had. The class tutor then threw the questioning session over to his students, and a goblin male at the rear of the class jumped right in. "You're the same age as us. Are you really a Centurion?" Activating his armor, and now Golden Harry dealt with the question. "You should all know that for anyone other than a Centurion to wear this armor merits a death sentence. Yes, I really am a Centurion." Goldskin wasn't about to let Harry get off that easy. "I think what he meant was, are you a real Centurion, or is the whole thing just a lame public relations exercise from the British branch of Gringotts?" Harry towered over Goldskin, and with his armor still activated, was quite an imposing sight. I wasn't aware you were here as an interpreter for what the students really mean, or are you just putting your own slant on an innocent and honest question? Turning his back on Goldskin before the goblin could reply, Harry once more faced the class. I have commanded warriors as we patrolled Hogwarts, after one of our friends was attacked inside the castle. I led 4 of the people you see here today, and Lady Black as we battled a basilisk. There have been some ridiculous rumors flying around about that beast. Can you give the class some specific details on it? Goldskin's continuing to interrupt along with his patronizing speaking to children voice was really beginning to grate on Harry's nerves. We were too busy trying not to die to stop and measure the thing, but when I delivered the killing blow, its death throes, saw it land on my mate. The beast was so big it crushed both her legs, and we needed 30 goblin warriors with levers to move the basilisk enough for our father to slip Hermione out from under it. He then turned to Goldskin, and there was no mistaking the annoyance Harry displayed. Is that enough specific details for you? How about the fact that the carcass has so far generated a profit that's approaching 2 million galleons? The amount of gold involved captured everyone's attention, but Harry had returned his to the class and the original question. I have also fought an honor duel in the pit. Only being a centurion allowed me to do so at my age. This final revelation drew a shocked squeal from Sapphire. She didn't even put her hand up and receive permission to ask her question. You fought in the pit, Harry. What happened? Our friend Dragonbreath caused it, and then the coward wouldn't face me. His father, of course, backed his son, and I was left to face their nominated champion. Brave words when the goblins involved are thousands of miles away and unable to defend themselves. Goldskin never got to finish, as Harry had clearly reached his limit on how much he was going to let Sapphire's father needle him. He was a centurion and would be treated with the respect his position demanded. The watchers around the pit all saw Master Sharpshard's memory of how Hermione beat Dragontooth in a fight to first blood, only for the coward to strike at her with his blade after the match was over. I publicly called him a coward and threatened to cut his ears off if he came near my mate again in front of the director, Dragontooth. His father and at least 100 goblins gathered around the pit. He still chose to nominate a champion rather than face me. So you can save yourself the trouble of telling tales to Bloodfang. He is well aware of my opinion of him and his family. Harry was now standing right in front of a furious Goldskin and decided to apply some needling of his own. We had planned on crossing blades with a few volunteers from the class later, but I get the feeling you would have something to say about that too. Why don't we just skip all this posturing and you and I get right to it with a fight to first blood? You haven't believed a word I've said, so here's your chance to show everyone what a fraud I am. That is what you're trying to do here, isn't it? I accept. Thinking on his feet, Harry spotted an opportunity and went for it. If you're so sure of yourself, then surely a little wager shouldn't scare you. He was positive Goldskin wouldn't be able to resist, especially when the stakes became known. Wagering was almost a national sport to goblins. Though Goldskin obviously wanted to know the terms of this bet. I have more gold than my mate and I could ever spend, so let's make it something interesting. If I win, you will allow Sapphire to spend a week holidaying with us in Britain. And when I win, you will never have contact with my daughter ever again. I agree. The goblin spat on his hand and held it out. Harry reciprocated and they slapped hands to seal the terms of the wager. Padma nudged Hermione and nodded her head in the direction of Sapphire. The little goblin looked about ready to burst into tears. Neville sauntered over to join Harry as the tutor got the class ready to move to the training room. Both witches were soon beside Sapphire like a couple of bookends. This is my best friend, Padma. Don't worry, Sapphire, Harry won't hurt your father. Hermione, my father is very good with a blade. I can't believe Harry would gamble our friendship like that. My father will make sure we never see or hear from each other again. This drew a short, sarcastic laugh from Padma. I watched Harry take Master Sharpshot apart after he made the mistake of harming Hermione. Unless your father's better with a sword than Master Sharpshot, then you better start packing a bag because you're coming back to Scotland with us. You're clearly important to Harry, so he won't be messing about with this fight. Sapphire turned to Hermione for confirmation. Yes, she is my best friend, though Padma can take some getting used to. She's telling the truth though. Harry is very, very good, and has abilities that mean he could draw first blood before your father got a chance to lift his blade. He won't lose. You're coming to Scotland with us for a holiday." With that information, a now far more assertive Sapphire moved forward to where the bets were being whispered amongst her fellow students, quickly offering the most favorable odds and covering every wager she could lay her hands on. There were some shocked faces that she would bet against her own father, but this was strictly business. Sapphire was now going on holiday and wanted some spending money. Seeing both girls obviously comforting Sapphire made Harry smile. Tonks, though, was not amused in the slightest. "Only you, Harry, could turn a school visit into a bloody fight. No messing around here. Finish this quickly. Madam Bones will have my badge and arse if I stand back and watch you getting injured." "Why thanks, Tonks. And here was me thinking it was my health you were worried about. Just do this guy without getting injured. You wouldn't want me getting upset with you now, would you? Tonks, you're on my list, but certainly way behind Henrika, Moa, Smeeta, and especially Emma. I'll be careful." By the time the pair got ready to fight, they had attracted quite the audience as word had spread. Goldskin was delighted with this, as he wanted everyone to see what a complete fraud this boy being made a centurion was. His opinion changed the instant the class tutor called fight. He'd never faced an opponent so powerful or so unbelievably quick, and there were barrels full of skill contained inside that iconic armor to back the other two up. While it was taking every ounce of concentration and experience, Goldskin had to keep those two flashing blades off him. The brat then had the nerve and time to chat. "I could shave the hairs off your ears and still not draw blood. I won't publicly take you apart because Sapphire is my friend, and you are her father, and that would also be behavior that was unbecoming of a centurion." In a move that Goldskin barely registered, the golden blur was inside his guard and his cheek was cut just below his eye. This drew gasps from those watching. That move was banned unless you were passed by a master to perform it. Too many goblins had lost eyes when their opponents weren't just as good as they thought they were. Harry gave the centurion's salute, then bowed deeper than he needed to, giving credit to his opponent. "While you are very good, I am a centurion who has trained under Master Sharpshed for over 6 years. He did me the great honor of presenting me with my badges of rank during my oath ceremony." Harry then spoke to the class tutor, hiding his relief after spotting a beaming Sapphire. "Sir, sorry, but we were never properly introduced. Since we are already here, could we give a demonstration of the fighting technique that we train in?" Like the vast majority of those watching, the tutor was astonished at how easily Goldskin had been defeated. He also, again like the vast majority of those watching, wanted to see what these four were actually capable of. Of course he said yes. While setting up a warded area with their portable stones, Harry gave a brief explanation of what they were about to witness. "We are developing a style of fighting that is both magical and goblin, using wands and goblin shields unless close enough for our blades to be more effective. Neville and Padma have only been friends of the nation for a matter of months, but are working hard to learn the noble art of using the blades our director personally presented them with." As their demonstration began, there were gasps of amazement from the watchers. It was a 3-on-1 duel, but Harry's speed and mobility meant he was holding his own. There were curses being dodged, reflected off goblin shields, and occasionally magical shields were being used too, as the quartet impressed all the spectators with their obvious fighting skills. Goldskin felt sick as everyone now realized the boy was holding back in their fight. That knife of his could have cast a spell and ended the contest before it had truly begun. That sickly feeling only intensified when he sensed Barchoke was now behind him, not something he was comfortable with. "Isn't my daughter magnificent? Is it any wonder our nation are taking her to their heart as she fights at my son's side, brave enough to charge Master Sharpshed with her blade when he attacked her mate in a fight, yet also one of the smartest witches I've ever met. As he's now a centurion, my son will also inherit our family vaults as well as those of the Potter family, making him one of the wealthiest persons in Britain." That could have been Sapphire at his side. Instead you chose to rip her away and leave my son totally isolated for years. Goldskin's attention was currently focused on his own daughter, her blue eyes, so full of excitement and happiness that they were sparkling as brightly as the gems for which she was named. The thought of his daughter with a human had seen him flee Britain, but that human was now a centurion and had just wiped the floor with him while holding back. Had he listened to the wrong people all those years ago? Had he made a mistake? It was as if Barchoke could read his mind. We know about the stories coming out of Britain, that is why we are here, and I would like to thank you for your help in dispelling most of them. My son was awarded centurion status on merit, and Master Sharpsword thinks he will one day be one of the nation's greatest warriors. I think that day is no more than a few years away. I love my wonderful daughter as if she were my own, and will cherish my grandchildren as the precious gifts they will be. What you see with your own eyes is the future goblins, wizards, and even muggles all getting along together. There are already dwellings being built on my son's land in Scotland, with full approval of the ministry and the nation, something I never thought would happen in my lifetime. This group had been a big hit last night, and word of today would certainly only add to that acceptance. The whispers from London were dissipating like the mist in the morning, when faced with the blindingly obvious glare of truth that was right in front of their eyes. Change is coming, despite those who plot against it. You have clearly chosen your side, but you have an opportunity to play it smart and ensure your daughter is protected, no matter what happens. My son will go to any lengths to protect his friends. Only my presence prevented him killing Master Sharpsword after the fool injured Harry's mate. By Sapphire's association with him, she might even be able to protect her family when Bloodfang and his ilk finally make their move. A shudder of dread ran through Goldskin at that. Barchoke clearly knew about the whispers, who was behind them, and that same person had ambitions to take things further than mere whispers. Since my son attended Hogwarts as a goblin, the nation's profile has never been higher, and neither has Gringotts' profits, up over 17% in just 2 years. Here was something that the whispers never mentioned, probably because goblins would be prepared to accept quite a few changes to see profits increase by a lot less than the margin just indicated. Goldskin then uttered his first words since the fight. I shall speak with her tutor and explain Sapphire will be missing lessons. Do I have your assurance my daughter will be safe? She will be watched over like my own daughter. No harm will come to her while I still draw breath. With that formal oath, Goldskin graciously accepted just as the demonstration ended, to much cheering from the swelling audience. With limited space and bare terrain, they had put a 5-minute time limit on the duel, and all 4 were still standing at the end. The next half an hour was then spent having a much more friendlier question and answer session, with all 4 offering their views. An overjoyed Sapphire left to spend the rest of the day with them, her departure closely watched by a thoughtful father. Goldskin now understood why Bloodfang was so worried about this matter. While he had been somewhat easily defeated in his fight today, the group were also outright winners in the battle for hearts and minds. One look at the jealous stares directed in his daughter's direction as she left with her friend was enough to confirm that, leaving Goldskin to wonder what would have happened if he hadn't reacted to taunts and stares of a different kind. 7 years ago, that was water over the dam, though, as the Centurion had clearly made his choice. It was now all about making the best of the situation they found themselves in. In her wildest dreams, Emma had never envisaged herself in this situation. She was in the arms of her prince, cruising along the Nile, bathed in moonlight while sitting on a flying carpet. Those last 2 words reverberated around her brain as if they had been shouted into the mouth of a cave. That seemed very apt, as her brain had gone missing the instant this magical rug had lifted off the ground. She had felt as if they had stepped onto the set of an Indiana Jones movie this morning as Bill had led them around an active dig. Holding something in her hand that no other human had touched for thousands of years had given Emma such a thrill, only to be eclipsed by this. This really was magical. Magical was the only word Sapphire had to describe this experience too. Goblins tended to spend their lives underground, certainly not up in the air and held there by only a rug. It was also magical to be with her friend again. She had cried for days when her father had moved them out of Britain. Harry had certainly changed. He was now a centurion and had chosen his mate, but there was enough of that little boy she once knew still there for their friendship to reignite almost instantly. His family and friends had been wonderful too. Just the term Harry's friend saw her receive immediate acceptance, her being a goblin not mattering a jot. It could have been awkward meeting his mate, but Hermione had accepted her at once, and Sapphire was very grateful for that. Luna too quickly became a friend, and she was thoroughly enjoying her day, and couldn't wait for her trip to Scotland. Tonks was sitting behind the Grangers and had to pull out her badge to ensure she was on the same carpet as Harry. The dealer was trying to impose his 6 to a carpet rule, but the aura convinced him this was a special case. With Harry, Hermione, Luna and Sapphire sitting in front of Dan and Emma, they were all having a wonderful time. Her attention, though, kept wandering to the full moon illuminating the beautiful country below, and what this meant for a certain wizard back in Britain. Remus would be going through his transformation alone, and Tonks couldn't believe how much that thought hurt her. In less than a year she had progressed to the point where the handsome Bill Weasley's attentions meant nothing to her. She was truly smitten by the werewolf. They would have to talk when she got back to Britain. As the caravan of flying carpets silently glided along above the Nile, Padma was sitting beside Neville and enjoying her favorite form of magical transport, until they could complete their animagus transformations. That is, her enjoyment of this evening, though, was somewhat spoiled by the sight of her sister practically throwing herself at a clearly nervous Cedric. He was also clearly regretting Parvati's invitation to share their carpet, and Cedric's nerves were understandable, since their parents were sitting on the carpet too. Her sister's behavior, though, was neither understandable nor acceptable, and Padma would be having a talk with her later. "Parvati, we need to talk. I could feel your eyes boring into my back, so let's get this over with. I was only having a bit of fun." "That line might work on Mum and Dad, but not me. You've already got a boyfriend, so what the hell was that all about tonight? You were practically in Cedric's lap and he appeared about ready to jump off the carpet before our father threw him off. They were having to keep their voices down as they got ready for bed. Parvati didn't want to say the next bit too loud anyway. Blaze and I decided just to be friends. We'll be each other's dates for anything that comes up, until one of us finds someone else. I thought you two were getting on well. What happened?" This drew a sigh from Parvati. "Nothing. And that's the problem. I watch Harry kiss Hermione and reduce that girl to goo. You and Neville are so close too. Kissing Blaze is nice, but without the spark you four clearly have, that's all it is. I just want more than nice. Is that wrong?" "No, Pav. It's not wrong, and as long as Blaze knows this, then that shouldn't be a problem. I do see a major one, though." She couldn't keep her twin waiting, and told her what she needed to do. "Remember how you tried the same approach with Harry and Neville, and how well it worked then?" "Yeah, but we get on really well now. Neville and me are quite close. He really sees himself as my brother and I love him for it." "That's what I'm trying to say. I was Neville's friend before anything else came out of our relationship. Hermione was the same with Harry. I would say that if you're interested in Cedric, then get to know him first. Become his friend and see what he's really like before looking for anything more." Parvati couldn't really look at her sister as she asked her something. "Do you think Harry would let me be one of the Marauder trainers and work with Cedric?" She was sure the chances of that happening were practically nil, but couldn't really say that to her twin. Taking a Marauders class is hard work. For all of us. Neville and me don't walk about making doe eyes at each other. All our time is taken up working with our groups. Cedric worked with me on this year's Marauders and we weren't having cozy chats. We were working our asses off, being encouraging while trying to make sure no one pushed themselves too hard, and still ensuring everyone remained safe at the same time as curses were flying. It's hard and bloody difficult work. Are you saying I couldn't do it? No, Pev, what I'm saying is that it's a very big commitment, one that we all enjoy though. What would happen if you don't hit it off with Cedric, and even if he gets a girlfriend, you'll be left the whole year working with him? If this is something you want to do for the right reason, I'll certainly put your name forward, but not so you can get closer to Cedric. The Marauders is something that means a lot to all of us, and something we want to see running for years to come. If you want to be part of that, then great. But be prepared to be spending the next few months knackered. Parvati was positive her sister wasn't lying to her, so she would have to strike that idea off her list. There were now clear physical differences between the two that Parvati had no wish to emulate. The sword fencing had been the first thing to begin developing Padma's body. Of exercising in the morning had only accelerated that development. It was more than the long bottom ring on her finger that allowed others to differentiate between the twins now. A certain other pair of twins wore identical looks of disbelief at what they held in their hands. "She can't do this to us. The woman is mad. Our reputation will be ruined. This is a prank. Please tell us this is a prank." Bill was roaring with laughter at the antics of his twin brothers. Neither had bothered to see that they had both passed their potions. OKWL without standing, as all Fred and George's attention was focused on the prefect badges their Hogwarts letters had also contained. Percy's attention was focused on his own letter and whether it contained that much coveted badge. It did. His jubilation was contained, though. The badge alone meant nothing if the wonderful witch who had snuggled up to him on their magical carpet ride last night didn't have its twin. Penny's eyes flashed mischievously before holding her badge up for her boyfriend to see. A loud whoop from Percy alerted everyone who'd been laughing at the Weasley twins' antics that there was another story unfolding at the breakfast table. Penny was now laughing as Percy had her up in the air and twirling around in his arms. They had done it. Head boy and girl, together. There were 4 very happy younger Ravenclaws all waiting for Percy, putting Penny down so they could congratulate her too. With Roger also becoming a prefect and Cedric receiving both prefect and Quidditch captain badges, it was quickly decided tonight would be a celebration, the only problem being how you topped last night. Sirius was worried he was becoming a trifle predictable, but his wife kissed those worries away. Henrika was currently in his arms and dancing as they once more glided along the Nile, this time though in a cruise boat her husband had hired to celebrate all the good news that had came from Hogwarts that morning. "We had our very first date on a boat like this. Dinner and dancing while afloat will always have a special place in my heart. I hope we get to do this in countries all over the world." An appreciative Henrika made Sirius a very happy wizard. Bill wasn't exactly unhappy, just feeling slightly unappreciated as he danced with a witch who clearly had something or someone else on her mind. "Do I need to join the fabled ranks of the marauders to get a young lady interested in me?" This drew a weak smile from Tonks. "Sorry, Bill, my mind was kinda wandering there, and me on duty too." She looked over to where Harry towered over the little goblin and was attempting to teach Sapphire to dance. It could have been construed as funny, but the aura just thought it was one of the sweetest things she'd seen. And here was me thinking your attention was on another wizard, a certain Hogwarts professor. Sirius is my cousin, and already married. You know fine well I was talking about his best friend, Remus Lupin. What's the deal between you two? It's complicated, Bill. We've been spending a lot of time together though, funnily enough. This week apart has focused my thoughts more on what kind of relationship Remus and I have, and what I'd like it to be. So again I lose out to a marauder. I am so glad there's no more of them. Tonk's smile switched from weak to wicked. You do know Harry and his friends are currently training the next generation of marauders. I hardly think I'm going to be looking for dates from Hogwarts. Oh, I don't know, Bill, there's just something so sexy about an older man. He leaned in and whispered in her ear. I see Parvati thinks the same. You will protect me if I become her next target. Watching as Parvati practically dragged Cedric onto the dance floor had Tonks chuckling with amusement and part relief. Relief that Bill understood he had no chance. She knew how close Harry was to Bill and didn't need the complication of fending off a suitor while trying to do her job. Now, if that suitor was Remus, there wouldn't be any fending required. Parvati had decided to approach the problem like a Gryffindor, so dragged Cedric onto the dance floor. It was time for some straight talking. I'm sorry if I embarrassed you last night, Cedric. It was Padma who pointed out that you didn't know Blease and I were no longer a couple. There was no falling out. We just decided to only be friends. She thought bringing Padma's name into it added a bit of credibility to her apology, and it was near enough the truth for her to live with. I think I was rather obvious last night that I would like to be your girlfriend. Padma again advised me that it's better to become a boy's friend first. So, can I be your friend? It was a relieved Cedric who was able to answer her honestly. Parvati, next term I have OTWLs, and we're starting our own Marauders Club. I'm also a prefect and Quidditch captain. I honestly don't think I'll have time to fit in a girlfriend, but I certainly have room for more friends." It was a smiling Parvati who kissed him on the cheek. "All I ask is that when you get around to choosing a girlfriend, you remember my offer. If anything changes with me before that time, I promise to let you know. Deal?" Now wearing a smile of his own, Cedric returned her kiss on the cheek. "We have a deal, Miss Petil. I just hope my Hufflepuff team beating Gryffindor at Quidditch won't spoil our new friendship." This had Parvati laughing and allowed her twin sister to relax. Neville of course noticed this. It was hard to miss as she was currently in his arms as they danced. "Everything okay, love?" "I think Pev took my advice." She and Cedric looked much happier. Neville actually thought Cedric looked relieved but wasn't about to say so. He'd some first-hand experience of what Parvati making a pass at you felt like. Relief was certainly what he'd felt when he managed to dodge it. Harry was back in Hermione's arms, but his attention kept wandering to where Roger was now dancing with Sapphire. "She'll be fine, Harry." "Oh, I know, just as I know how hard this is for her. Culture shock doesn't quite cover what Sapphire's experienced the last few days." "Yes, but unlike you, she has a very good friend watching out for her." "I had a very good friend watching out for me too. She was so good at it I offered her the job full-time." "Harry Crow, I can see I'm going to have to limit your exposure to TV." That line was pure cheese. Seeing her mate's confused look, Hermione made a suggestion. "Just kiss me, Harry, that tells me everything that needs saying." Harry happily complied with his mate's wishes. Fred and George had charmed their prefect badges to flash different colors. They proudly wore them as they danced with Hannah and Susan. Percy and Penny had of course left their new badges back in the house. They were for later. His thoughts now were of Penny and also what they had learned on this holiday. Bill had asked them to keep an open mind, and the couple just had their eyes well and truly open too. There was a whole wide world out there away from Hogwarts and the Ministry of Magic, and there was nothing to stop them exploring and experiencing all of it. The experience of being Harry's friend was both old and new for Sapphire. When they were relaxing in his home in Kinkusi, it felt as if the years just melted away. Watching him with Hermione filled her heart with joy to see her friend so happy. Walking down Diagon Alley with them was certainly new, as was sitting in Florian Fortescue's ice cream parlor and the proprietor himself shooting over to serve them. A picture of that event actually ended up on the front page of the Daily Prophet with a headline proclaiming "Hogwarts heroes relax with friends." The entire emphasis of the story was aimed at proving that despite there being 2 escaped Death Eaters on the loose, Diagon Alley was still completely safe. No mention was made that one of those friends was a goblin, just as they were made very welcome wherever they went. This was Sapphire's first real experience of the power her friend wielded. If Harry thought it was safe to shop in Diagon Alley with his friends, then this would set the standard for the rest of magical Britain, and all the shopkeepers obviously knew this. If Diagon Alley was an experience, then stepping into Gringotts was a revelation. Harry receiving a centurion salute from everyone they saw might have been expected, but those same goblins then bowing to Hermione was just mind-blowing. That she was by their side seemed to please those they met even more. That took some thought until Hermione whispered that they were obviously pleased to see Harry wasn't forgetting his goblin roots. Meeting the director as he visited Harry's father had Sapphire shaking with excitement. He even spoke to her. "Nice to see you back in London, young Sapphire," would be forever imprinted on her mind. The director knew her name and who she was, all because she was friends with Harry. Her weeks seemed to fly past and she was fighting back the tears as it was time to say goodbye. A few did leak out though, when Hermione presented her with a sapphire pendant necklace to remind her of their friendship, and told Sapphire she would always be welcome in their home. She was returning to Cairo with loads of memories and a copy of the Prophet that had her picture in it. No one would believe her otherwise. She promised to write and thanked everyone for a wonderful holiday before disappearing as her portkey activated. With it being the holiday period, their busiest time of the year, the disappearance of a tent and full range of camping equipment, and even some clothes, wasn't picked up in the Camping Emporium warehouse until they did their end-of-the-month stocktake. With no signs of an external break-in, the manager was left with the conclusion that one of the staff had helped themselves, and that totally pissed him off. He would make their lives hell until he discovered who the thief was. Then he would contact the police to see justice done. Amelia was pressing to see justice done, but there was a definite aversion in the chamber to purebloods being sentenced to death. They'd chosen the 1st of September for the trial of the Carrows, since it worked so well with Malfoy last year. At this rate, though, the Express would reach Hogsmeade before she could get a decision out of this lot. I understand perfectly the view that these two wouldn't have been involved in any of this had Rookwood and Lestrange not turned up at their door. I also understand both feared for their lives from their former compatriots. I am not disputing any of that. Only Amelia's years of experience stopped her frustration from showing as the same arguments were thrown at her again and again. What is also indisputable is that they had ample opportunities to report to the ministry where these two deadly fugitives were hiding and didn't take them. On at least 2 occasions, both Lestrange and Rookwood were away from their hideout to murder muggles. A flukehall or even an owl would have seen 2 different people sitting in those chairs and the Carrows sharing the reward money. Not only did they pass up those opportunities, they then took part in a raid on a muggle pub knowing fully what the consequences of those actions would be. All those years of experience were telling Amelia this was it. If she didn't win the doubters over this time, then it just wasn't going to happen. Were they reluctant accomplices? Yes. Could they have saved themselves and helped the ministry capture 2 very dangerous criminals? The answer has to be yes again. There are others out there in the same position as the Carrows, and we need to send them a message. They need to fear our justice more than Bellatrix Lestrange, or we'll never break this cycle of terrorism. The head of the DMLA was stopped mid-sentence by a message Patronus ghosting into the chamber and heading straight for her. A silver wolf spoke with Tonk's voice. Dementors stopped the train and wouldn't stand down when I ordered them to. We have 3 dead here. Bloodfang was beyond angry. He was in a killing rage. That picture in The Prophet of a Goblin sitting being served in a reputable British wizarding establishment, one outside of Nocturne Alley too, blew most of his arguments to smithereens and was such a coup for Ragnarok's supporters. Reports coming back from Cairo also indicated his strong grip there had deteriorated badly and any influence he had left was hanging by its fingernails. On the back of Barchoke's group visiting Cairo, that little bitch Sapphire was now spreading her stories of how wonderful her week in Britain had been to anyone who would listen, and she was being believed. He now regretted the decision to just have her leave the country and the crow whelp behind. He had still balked at the killing of children then, but the death of his brother in the pit had cured Bloodfang of that affliction. A dead friend would have had an even greater effect on the human boy than simply missing Sapphire. The current situation was forcing his hand to act quickly, otherwise it could be too late and Ragnarok would be untouchable. The human bitch's birthday would now be one of the worst days of her life. This would be the day her parents had their entrails spilled from their guts and dragged all over the floor of their home. He would be watching carefully as Crow was faced with the murder of people he considered family, just to see how he liked it. We all have family on that train, but this must be dealt with first. Emma's hated uttering those words, though, did allow a few minutes for Amelia to organize an oral response to the matter. Using those few minutes to focus her thoughts, Augusta Longbottom stood to address the chamber. While I applaud and support the ministry's tough stance on the Death Eaters, I have to disagree with some of what I've heard here today. Ruling by fear is the tactics that the Dark Lord uses. I want no part in anything to do with that approach to government. While you can count on my unconditional support to see Lestrange and Rookwood put to death, I can't in all good conscience give that support to those same measures for this case. What I believe we should be aiming for here is fostering a culture of trust in our government, not creating martyrs to a flawed cause. The Carrows were rightfully fearful of their 2 guests, but they didn't trust the ministry enough to help and protect them, and that should be our aim, to instill that trust in every wizard and witch in the country. The nodding heads of people Amelia was counting on for support told her they had lost the argument. The news from the Express, though, was putting any potential loss here into perspective. Augusta had more for the chamber to consider. I can speak from personal experience and say there are worse things than a quick death. Personally, I think life in Azkaban is a fitting punishment here. As the Hogwarts High Inquisitor and a grandmother to students on the Express, can I move we end the debate and vote on their punishment? I really need to be somewhere else. After that, it only took mere minutes for the Carrows to be sentenced to life in Azkaban. It was now time to discover just what had happened on the express. The little girl had wedged herself into the corner of the compartment and barely moved a muscle since they left London on this life-changing adventure into the great unknown. Natalie wasn't someone who hung about with the cool kids, so this company was somewhat overwhelming, though in a good way. Sensing that she was happier sitting quietly and observing all that was happening around her, the group didn't try and force her into the company but rather left Natalie to emerge from her cocoon in her own time. She had accepted some sweets from the trolley that the lady wheeled around, but mostly just sat and watched as a great proportion of the students on the train seemed to pop by at one point or another on this journey, even the head boy and girl. Natalie was starting to think she was really going to enjoy Hogwarts when the train rapidly slowed down before coming to a juddering halt. The pink-haired policewoman was suddenly very alert and had her wand already in her hand. "Tonks, do you know if there were any stops scheduled?" Harry was sure of the answer before he asked. Tonks just shook her head as she held her wand ready. "This might be nothing, but the ministry don't pay me to take chances. Let's just be ready. We're all bunched up in this carriage. It would make more sense to have some mobility. There's only one way in or out of here, Harry, and they will need to go through me first. We don't know what we're dealing with yet. Give it a minute until—" They all felt the cold at the same time. It was hard not to as the windows began to ice over and their exhaled breath was now visible. These signs told Tonks exactly what they were dealing with, and she withdrew her aura shield as a skeletal hand began to open the compartment door. "Ministry aura, the escaped prisoners aren't on the train. Stand down and leave at once." She'd projected as much authority into her voice as it was possible to do with a Dementor mere feet away from you. Unfortunately, it wasn't enough. The Dementors had been enraged that two beings had escaped from them. They were desperate to capture both and administer the swift justice that awaited. A month of searching, though, brought no results other than to increase not only their rage, but also their hunger. Then a veritable feast of magical users came rushing right into their midst. They had entered the train to search for the escapees, but the delicious waves of fear radiating from the young magical occupants was overpowering all their senses. It was like sitting a starving man down to a banquet and telling him he couldn't touch any of it. When compared to the delicious and enticing bouquet of a child's fear, a mere badge and a command were considered less than nothing by a famished Dementor. On seeing that the creature was actually edging its way into the compartment, Tonks attempted to cast her Patronus. She'd never tried the spell so close to a Dementor before, though, and was barely able to get a misty shield up, a shield that wasn't going to hold for very long. The Dementor was incensed that its sustenance was being denied. It pushed harder and harder against the shield until it met with something that was totally unfamiliar to its species: searing pain. Hermione's bracelet had every protection on it the goblins could manufacture, including protecting the wearer from mind attacks. This allowed her to act while the rest of the compartment were dealing with the effects that having a Dementor in their midst brought. Seeing that Tonks was struggling to hold the creature off, Hermione drew her sword and lunged forward, plunging her goblin-forged blade through its cloak, and felt the steel sinking into something solid. She had certainly hurt the Dementor, but her sword instantly became extremely cold. Hermione couldn't even let go as she now found her hand frozen to the hilt of her blade. Natalie was sure this was the boogeyman, come to get her. Hogwarts was obviously nothing more than a hoax to lure unsuspecting children onto a train so the monsters could take them away. She had no idea what the policewoman was doing, but even Natalie could see it wasn't working. Then Hermione drew her sword and stabbed the creature. Natalie heard loud screams, and it would take a moment for her to realize that she was the one doing the screaming. Harry was also hearing screams, but he knew who they belonged to. His mother was screaming for Voldemort to spare her son, and Harry was rooted to the spot. It was only when Natalie's much louder screams banished the vision from his head that Harry was able to act. Hermione's sword was buried in the Dementor's midriff and was clearly hurting the creature. The ice climbing along his mate's blade and the grimace of pain on her face saw a swift reaction from Harry. He too stabbed his blade into the Dementor, the difference being Harry could cast spells with Godric's sword. Knowing that Dementors were all about darkness and cold, with his blade buried in its body he cast a spell that was the complete opposite, Incendio. The tactic that worked so well against the basilisk was again paying dividends, though this time there was no magical backlash to deal with. Casting an incendio inside the Dementor's body was devastatingly effective and started a chain reaction. From the point that Gryffindor's sword entered the Dementor's body, that same body began to turn to ash as the spell took hold. This effect quickly spread until there wasn't enough body remaining to support the Dementor's cloak in the air. The black cloak sank to the floor before coming to rest on top of a pile of ash. The creature's deathly screams would live long in the memories of everyone who heard them, which would easily include every single passenger on the train. Harry was in full Centurion mode now, and took command of the situation. Padma, you're with me. Neville, you partner with Tonks. Hermione, stay and guard the compartment, you're wounded. Hermione so wanted to object not being included, but knew this was not the time. She took up a position just inside the door. The four were intending to make their way along the carriages and see if there were any more Dementors on the train. They never even made it out of their own carriage, though, as two more of the creatures had obviously been attracted by the screams of their fellow Dementor, and were bearing down on them from either end of the train. Tonks again tried to get the creatures to stand down, but they were clearly in no mood to listen. Padma stood ready with her blade in case she was needed as Harry used the same tactics again, with the same devastating effects. Quickly turning, they saw Neville had used his sword to keep the remaining Dementor off Tonks, but like Hermione, his hand was becoming frozen to the hilt of his sword. Another thrust and spell from the fabled magical blade of Godric Gryffindor saw the last of the terrible trio literally bite the dust. Penny and Percy had followed behind one Dementor while Cedric and Roger arrived from the other side. All reported there were no more Dementors on the express. With a jolt they were once more moving, and Tonks retook command as Harry shot back into the compartment to see how Hermione was. Luna had Natalie wrapped in her arms, comforting the girl as best she could. Hannah and Susan were standing guarding the door with Hermione, though all three couldn't hide their relief at seeing Harry return. That and the train was once more on the move. The danger's past, and everyone's okay. I think Neville might have the same injury as Hermione, though, since he stabbed one of them too. Let me look at that hand for you. Hermione struggled to open her fingers as layers of skin were literally stuck to the hilt of her sword. Silent tears ran down her cheeks as her precious blade was eventually parted from her hand to reveal the damage. Harry was using his knife with the skill of a surgeon to remove the dead and flapping skin before taking out a small bottle of dittany oil and lovingly applying it to her damaged hand. To my knowledge, no one has ever put a Dementor to the sword before, probably because no one would ever believe it could have any effect. What made you try that? Desperation. I don't know, the Petronus charm, and Tonks was clearly struggling to hold it off. I couldn't think of anything else to do. Harry wiped her tears of pain before leaning in and lovingly kissing his mate. Dementors make you relive your worst moments, and my thoughts were elsewhere. Hearing Natalie scream pulled me out of it. I promised her parents I would keep her safe, and you know I always keep my word. This earned a weak, chocolate-coated smile from the little witch. Hannah was currently dishing out the wonderful confectionery as Padma entered with an injured Neville. Harry only needed to cut some hanging strips of skin from Neville's fingers before Padma rendered first aid using her own bottle of the wonder oil. Do you all carry bottles of that stuff? Harry had Hermione's arm now in a sling and was arranging for her to sit on his lap as he answered Susan's question. You carry a blade, then you carry dittany. Accidents can happen, and many a life has been saved by closing a wound with dittany until a healer could be reached. Tonks arrived with Parvati to find Hermione being cradled in Harry's arms while she protected her injured hand in her sling. Neville had his good arm around Padma and his injured one in another improvised sling, while Hannah, Susan and Luna appeared to be doing a wonderful job on calming Natalie. As Parvati sat the other side of Neville, Tonks told them what she knew. All the prefects are patrolling the train and we should arrive in Hogsmeade in about 20 minutes. I sent a message to Madam Bones, so we can expect a welcoming committee. We have 2 people who need medical attention, and an entire train full of students who practically had the life scared out them. I commandeered the sweet trolley, and those same prefects are making sure every compartment has a share of the chocolate. I see you lot had your own stash. This drew a chuckle from Susan. Hannah is a chocoholic and always has a stash. Harry's already promised to replace it. What Tonks didn't tell them was that their 4 prefect friends were currently keeping the rest of the students away from their compartment, with 2 of them injured. They didn't need Gawkers. Susan had already levitated what was left of the Dementor out into the corridor. They didn't want to be sharing their compartment with that for the remainder of their journey to Hogsmeade. There was quite the reception committee waiting for the express arriving in Hogsmeade, including the Minister of Magic. Minerva had already made the decision that Hagrid wouldn't be taking the first years across the lake tonight. After their experience on the express, she wanted them inside the Hogwarts wards and under the staff's care as quickly as possible. As the express pulled into the station, an announcement was made for everyone to stay on the train until told to leave by an Auror. Since Tonks was an Auror, she had the occupants of her compartment up on their feet and moving as soon as the train came to a halt. The injured needed treatment and she had a report to make, but not before seeing Harry safely to Hogwarts. Spotting an Auror helping students off the train, Amelia headed straight there and was instantly rewarded with the sight of her niece. She may have had Susan wrapped in her arms, but the head of the DDMLA was still all business. Auror Tonks, report please. Who died? 3 Dementors, boss. They stopped and then boarded the express. I ordered them to stand down and leave, but they ignored me. By this time the first one was in the compartment with us, and I couldn't get my Patronus cast. I have 2 injured here and really want to get my charge inside the wards. Can I present my full report after that? She couldn't help but notice Hermione and Neville nursing injuries. So Amelia quickly agreed. She would hear the entire story from Tonks once they had everyone from the train transported to the castle. The news that all the students were safe shot along the Hogsmeade platform, and relief was the main emotion felt by those waiting. Augusta made her way over to the group and focused on her grandson's injury. Neville, what happened to your arm? It was Padma who proudly answered. Our brave Gryffindor here took on a Dementor with his sword. It's his hand that we need to get looked at. The brave Gryffindor in question was glad it was late evening to hide his blushing. It took a Ravenclaw, though, to show me how it was done. It was Hermione who figured it out. I didn't figure anything out, I just didn't have any other option at the time. The carriages soon had them at Hogwarts proper, and Harry knelt to have a quick word with Natalie. I need to go to the infirmary with Hermione, but you'll be safe in the castle. It has wards like your house, and those creatures can't get through them. After the sorting, you'll join your house. Don't worry about which one, because we have friends in all 4 of them, and there will be prefects to tell you everything you need to know. It may be breakfast tomorrow before we see you again, but we'll have it together, no matter what house you and Pauline are in. The little witch surprised everybody by throwing her arms around Harry and saying thanks. They had no sooner left for the infirmary when more first years arrived. Theo wasn't letting Pauline out of his sight, so found himself being dragged toward Natalie by his little sister. We all heard those things scream. It must have been awful. What happened? Natalie now found herself the center of attention, something she usually avoided like the plague. With Luna, Hannah and Susan there supporting her, though she was able to tell her new friend Pauline what happened. And ignore the fact that everyone else was now listening too. That thing came into our compartment and wouldn't leave. The policewoman put up this silver shield thing, but it wasn't enough. Hermione then stabbed it with her sword before Harry finished it off. They were awesome. Professor Flitwick had arrived and was organizing all the first years into a classroom before they would be called and sorted. Hogwarts thoughtfully arranged for mugs of hot chocolate to appear on the desks as the new students began bonding, all linked by the shared experience of being scared witless on the train. The doors of the infirmary crashed open as Sirius shot through them. He was closely followed by his wife and Remus, with all 3 rushing over to where there were 2 teens. They knew well, occupying beds while their bonded sat beside them. Sticking your sword into a Dementor is either the stupidest or bravest thing I've ever heard of. Hardly the reactions of a Ravenclaw. Hermione, "Gee, thanks, Sirius, I love you too." Poppy had covered Hermione's hand with a salve and was now in the process of bandaging it up. "Her hand I can cure, Professor Black. There is nothing anyone can do for their victims after a Dementor has administered a kiss." It was Padma who then chipped in. "There's not much you could do for the Dementors after these three had finished with them either." The three professors had to leave and attend the welcoming feast, and Harry advised Madame Pomfrey to go as well, knowing Hogwarts would look after them. They weren't disappointed as a table and 4 chairs appeared, allowing the friends to spend a much-needed quiet evening together. Madame Pomfrey would be examining Hermione and Neville again after the feast to see if they needed to spend the night, though both were confident they would be sleeping in their own dorms this evening. Tonks was meeting with another 4 people in what used to be the headmaster's office. Cornelius, Amelia, Emmus and Augusta were listening as her story unfolded. "Have you any idea why the Dementor wouldn't stand down?" "Sorry, Minister, no idea. I clearly identified myself as an Auror and displayed my shield. It just pushed further into the compartment. I didn't know how I was going to contain it until Hermione struck with her sword, then Harry finished it off. The other 2 paid even less attention to the order to stand down. They just came right at us. We would have been in serious trouble if it wasn't for those goblin blades." "Cornelius, we need to withdraw the Dementors back to Azkaban before someone gets hurt." This suggestion had the full backing of the Chief Warlock. I agree with Amelia. If they were prepared to ignore an aura to attack students, then there simply isn't another option. It was a proud grandmother who added her 2 nuts worth. "I don't know about anyone else, but the fact that we have discovered a method of killing those nightmares is a great relief. I just wished those 2 hadn't gotten injured discovering it. I'll issue the order for them to be withdrawn back to Azkaban as soon as we return to the Ministry." Augusta also makes a very good point. The Dementors will soon know we have a method to hurt and even kill them. Should Voldemort return, that knowledge could see the Dementors stay out of the fight. This has potentially denied the Dark Lord one of the most potent weapons in his arsenal. What Cornelius wasn't saying was that those 4 students had probably saved the Ministry from a backlash that could have seen heads roll. Dementors kissing students on the Hogwarts Express would certainly put a major dent in their popularity rating. Those 4 apparently didn't know the meaning of the word impossible. Trolls, Basilisk and Dementors had now all fallen to goblin steel wielded by wizards and witches. Once more the heroes of Hogwarts had risen to the occasion and saved the day. Since we caught the Carrows, there hasn't been a sighting of Lestrange or Rookwood anywhere. It doesn't make sense to have Dementors combing the country for a couple of escaped prisoners who have possibly fled abroad. All could see how unhappy Amelia was at having to voice that last conclusion. She really wanted those 2 caught. Harry's had a guard all summer, and I think it would be prudent to keep a small aura presence in the castle while he's here. Amelia never got to finish as she was interrupted by an excited aura. "Madam Bones, I would respectfully like to apply for that duty. It was you I had in mind for the position, Aura Tonks, but I was going to ask the Hogwarts High Inquisitor for her permission first." Augusta had seen the chemistry building between her defense professor and the vivacious young Aura. She would be delighted to have her presence in the castle and would sort out the specifics of how they would handle the situation later. "I thought you handled that situation wonderfully, lover. I would probably just have taken my wand out and started cursing. A confundus charm on a piece of parchment means they will think we have the correct documents, and these glamours will save us from being recognized. We'll be in France inside an hour." The plan to escape Britain on the 1st of September worked like a dream. The Ministry would have all their focus on a train and the Carrows trial. That they were using the Muggle Channel ferry to cross from Dover to Calais would mean there would be no record of them leaving. They also chose the last ferry of the day in the hope that security would be even laxer. They watched as the famous white chalk cliffs receded behind them, both silently promising they would return with their master and make the country suffer tenfold for all the pain that had been inflicted on them. They would proceed cross-country and spend their nights under the stars, for a couple that had each spent the last decade entrapped in an Azkaban cell. Camping was certainly no hardship. Just having company when they woke in the morning was a luxury. Both swore never to take for granted. Augustus once more impressed on his impulsive mate that they would only get one shot at this. Their master had been missing for 12 years. It was far more important they took their time and did things properly, rather than rush in and increase the likelihood of failure and their capture. It was always a delicate operation trying to convince Bella not to go with her impulses, but so far he was succeeding in curbing her more psychotic tendencies. She would have used the Cruciatus on a muggle daring to search through her things. A simple confundus charm left the customs official happy and still alive. Like any other normal couple on the ferry, Bella and Augustus stood holding hands as the ship ploughed its way through the choppy waters of the busiest stretch of ocean on the planet. Unlike those other couples, though, these two had torture, murder, and mayhem on their mind. Like a certain headmaster who left the country last year, both also swore they would be back. Neville was delighted Padma was back at his side. A tearful Parvati had been waiting for him that morning in the common room and refused to let go of his arm until they met up with the Ravenclaw contingent, who were also on their way to breakfast. "Why is it always you guys who have to put your lives at risk? We had a Dementor pass our compartment, but it didn't try to come in." Padma was on Neville's arm but now had her free one around her clearly upset twin. "Padma, we don't go looking for trouble. Just like yesterday, trouble seems to know where we are and invite itself in for a visit. Once the Dementor entered our compartment, things went from bad to worse in a matter of seconds. We really didn't have a lot of options other than those we took. Those Dementors had me reliving every bad thing in my life, and then we heard the screams. I just knew it would be you four that were involved again. I felt so alone, and then there were even more screams. Why does it always have to be you?" Padma looked toward Neville for some inspiration, but he could only shrug his shoulders. "Hey sis, as Padma says, we just deal with whatever comes along as best we can. We were late getting back from the infirmary last night and you had already gone up to bed, Madame Pomfrey. Only allowed us to leave after Hermione and I promised that we would report back there right after breakfast." Harry was only paying minimal attention to Parvati's emotional meltdown, and not for the first time, wondered how two sisters could be so different. His thoughts would turn to his mother and her sibling, stopping that wondering in its tracks. He wouldn't be able to settle until he could see for himself that little Natalie was all right. Luna had told them she made Hufflepuff and Pauline was sorted into Slytherin. He knew that Susan, Hannah and Cedric would all keep an eye on her, and Theo would certainly watch over his sister in Slytherin. He just wanted to see for himself that she was happy. There was a large group waiting on their arrival in the Great Hall. All their friends wanted to check on how they were after their latest adventure. Pauline and Natalie were mixed in there too, and both girls had smiles on their faces. "I had to tell the girls that breakfast together was out. We need to be at our own tables to receive our timetables. I suggested we all have lunch together, and then they can both tell us what they thought of their first class in Hogwarts." Harry quickly agreed to her suggestion. "Thanks for that, Susan. I wasn't at my best last night. Okay, girls, looks like we have a date for lunch." It was two happy and giggling new first years who now made their way back to their respective tables as Hermione leaned into Harry. "You know that by using the D word you've just made those girls the envy of all the witches. You do know, and that's why you used it. They had a hard day yesterday. If a simple thing like that can make them happy, then why not? We're just going to be sitting in Hogwarts and eating lunch." She then had a confession for him. "I remember a certain first year who thought spending an evening with Harry Crow was heaven. It was only an astronomy class, but I thought it was the most romantic night of my life." This earned Hermione a kiss, as Harry led her over to their usual seats at the Ravenclaw table. Professor Flitwick was already there and had timetables for his now famous trio. "You will notice that the extra defense tuition you requested will take place on a Wednesday afternoon and a Thursday morning. I was asked to pass on that the timetabled session set for this morning has been cancelled since two of you are injured. I also need to tell you that Aura Tonks intended to visit all your parents before this morning's edition of The Prophet gets delivered. We all felt that your latest exploits might feature heavily in the paper and we didn't want them to hear the news that way." All three paled at that. Their parents' reactions to the news would be rather predictable. It soon turned out to be a sensible precaution, as the Prophet had the story splashed all over its front page, though readers could be forgiven for thinking it was the back page, as the entire article was written as a sports report. The headline set the tone of what was to follow. Hogwarts Heroes 3 Dementor 0. The article was riddled with sports puns, with Hermione and Neville now having a move named after them. Apparently anyone attempting to repeat their feats would be performing a Granger gouge or a long-bottom lunge. These, though, were only the appetizers for the main course. You needed Crow's cremation curse to finish the Dementor off. Am I glad I never had to stick my sword into one of them? Merlin knows what they would have concocted to rhyme with Patil. Well, if you had stabbed it in the throat, my guess would have been pain in the neck. Then again, I think you should be called that anyway. Luna burst into fits of laughter at Hermione's joke and Padma's pretend pout. Yeah, laugh it up, Granger. Just because it says in the paper that your mate is hot doesn't buy you any favors here. I happen to think my lunging longbottom is the sexiest thing on two legs. That this lot were again on the front page and once more joking about it meant that normal service had returned to Hogwarts. Normal since Harry had arrived, that is. Minerva then stood to give a few announcements that weren't made at the welcome feast. Last year we held a Merlin ball in Hogwarts, to celebrate one of our own having received this most prestigious of awards. With now 6 award winners in Hogwarts, it is something we very much want to repeat this year. The event will take place on the last Saturday of this month. This drew much cheering from the assembled students, forcing McGonagall to wait on some quiet to impart the next piece of news. The more astute amongst you will have noticed I said 6 holders. And no, I didn't miscount. Aura Tonks has been assigned to Hogwarts as a security consultant for the foreseeable future. This again drew much cheering, as Tonks was a popular figure inside the castle. Apart from the Florida group who had holidayed with her, she also taught last year's defense classes on those occasions when Remus was indisposed with his furry little problem. It was a bunch of happy students who headed off to their first class of the new academic year, a far cry from how they were feeling after arriving at Hogwarts last night. Parvati accompanied Neville over to the Ravenclaw table, and her mood had changed too. She was livid. I've now got a double period of divination with that prat Ronald, but I don't need to be a seer to know there's a good slapping in that boy's future. Why? What's he done? Padma appeared ready to chase after him before Neville's good hand rested on her shoulder. Nothing, love, he was just mouthing off as usual. He was calling Neville stupid for dropping classes, yet only ending up with 1 free period a week. I'll show him what mental really is if he says any more. Parvati had to shot away at that to find the divination classroom. Harry's timetable was sitting on the table in front of him, and today would now be a very quiet day. We have the morning off due to you two being injured, then our one and only free period after lunch. The only class we've got today is a period of defense with Remus. Padma was also studying their identical timetable. We have extra defense on a Wednesday afternoon. I don't fancy having a Marauders class after that. Today would probably not be suitable for the same reason. It's looking like Monday or Tuesday would be best. I had a quick glance at Luna's timetable. They have astronomy on a Tuesday, so that's out. Hermione's news effectively slotted this year's Crow's Marauders meetings into Monday nights. All 4 headed off to the infirmary. They were still discussing their club as they walked. Any more thoughts on the helpers? Padma didn't think her sister would be quoted. In truth, she doubted Parvati's commitment. I think we had all pretty much agreed on who the 8 would be. Susan, Hannah, Draco, Pansy, Blaze, Daphne, Morrigan, Terry. Sorry, Padma. There were people higher on the list than Parvati who didn't make it. It's fine, Harry. That's a good list. How are we going to split them? I was thinking 3 of the girls would work with the first years. Help balance that. It's 4 wizards leading the class. That's as far as I got. Neville then had a suggestion. Why don't we all sit down tonight at dinner and sort it out then? No one else had anything better, so that's what they decided. Reginald couldn't believe how well his previous decisions had just played out. Your daughter really attacked a Dementor with her blade? It was understood that the director meant no disrespect with that rhetorical question. It was rather a hard concept to accept, far less believe. That 3 friends of the nation assisted a centurion in destroying a trio of those foul things is a feat that deserves its own tableau in the Hall of Heroes. That they have provided us with a means for defeating Dementors is a blessing that merits its own reward. Barchoke was certainly aware this unbelievable news would further their case for gradual integration benefiting all parties involved. It would also diminish Bloodfang and his ilk's credibility as they lobbied hard for the status quo, or even taking steps back toward medieval times. What really worried the ambassador, though, was that all their success lately was backing the opposition into a corner, and that just might make that opposition dangerous. Albus was studying the news coming out of Britain and could see dangerous times ahead. The alliance between the Ministry and Goblins was paying dividends that no one could have foreseen. It was the unofficial alliance of Longbottom and Potter that really piqued his interest, though. That both boys had also chosen their brides made for a very strongly bonded quartet. He still stinned to get close to the boy and help in the battle against Voldemort. The other 3 being so close just made that task a lot more difficult. This was something he was going to have to ponder later as duty called. It felt good to be working again. Sirius was also enjoying working again, especially after just taking his first class. The new Muggle Studies professor was sitting beside his wife having lunch and watching the relief on 3 students' faces, as Tonks told Hermione, Harry and Padma about visiting their parents with the news of what happened on the train. As the Auror made her way to the staff table, a devious plan formed in the marauder's mind. He turned to Henrika and made sure Remus could hear every word. "I know we are married now, but I feel I should still ask, would the beautiful Lady Black allow me the honor of escorting her to the Hogwarts Merlin Ball?" Henrika just kissed his cheek by way of an answer. She too had figured out what he was up to. Remus knew exactly what his fellow marauder was doing and decided to act on the advice he was being offered in Sirius's own inimitable style. As Tonks sat down beside them for lunch, he made his move. "Aura Tonks, could I please have the honor of accompanying you to the Hogwarts Merlin Ball?" "Why, I would like that very much, Professor Lupin," while using all her abilities to appear composed on the outside. Inside, Tonks was doing an upbeat version of her happy dance. Those Dementors could be close enough to waltz with her now, and this very happy Aura was certain she would still be able to cast her Patronus. That her Patronus had now become a wolf was not something she wanted to discuss at this particular moment. She had a date with Remus for a ball and was going to be based in Hogwarts all year. She was a very happy witch.